All right, here we go. Episode 118 of Height Drop, this time with Robbie Corbett. And he is the co-owner of the World Freerunning and Parkour Federation, WFPF or WFPF, the creator of the parkour certification that they offer. And he's the competition director at the International Parkour Federation, which also translates into USA Parkour Cup competition director and World Parkour Championship Cup director. And he's a certified stuntman. So please visit the description so you can kind of get a lay of the land. He does a lot of work in the world of competition and parkour competition. And it's plenty to look at in the description. So please check it out. And then he's had a crazy epic journey through parkour, as you might imagine, to get where he is at. So we talked about his backstory a little bit. This is the first time we got to connect, and so that was important and fun. And then we went into some parkour definition stuff, but the big thing obviously with the work that he does is just talking about parkour competition. And so we really hashed that out. We touched on the UFC at times, skateboarding, and the whole Dana White situation was a fun little bit, but also, you know, and importantly, the biggest thing is the whole Olympic parkour situation, how that's unfolding and his perspective as the technical director of IPF and what's been happening there with Parkour Earth, FIG, and everything else related to that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Definitely a really big one. Loved it. Thank you, Robbie, for being on the program. And thank you all for listening. I think I pretty much covered it. Without further ado, let's get into this episode with Robbie Corbett. But let me just officially welcome you to the program. Thank you for
having me.
Thanks for taking the time out and doing this. Just off the bat, we are meeting kind of for the first time, and we're having a nice little chat here. But I want to make sure, and also for my own benefit here, I get to know you a little bit better. And if you can just lay it out, who is Robbie Corbett, and like, how did you become? I know that's a big ass question, but I don't want to box it inside the world of parkour.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I know that like you have, some really, you do a lot. You're the co-owner of the WFPF, creator of the certification there. You doing the competition direction through the, excuse me if I'm off base on any of this, but the World Parkour Championships and the IPF, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
you help direct those things, and then you're also a certified stuntman. So it would be great to just kind of get your whole life story in a nutshell, whatever you feel is relevant. Obviously you're not going to cover everything.
No, absolutely. So I'm Robbie Corbett, 36 years old. I'm trying to think where to start. Just was always into extreme sports over team sports growing up. Skateboarding was probably my first passion sport, and that was, to give an idea of how long that was before Tony Hawk Pro Skater, so quite a while back.
And excuse me for interrupting. I might do it if
do it.
Where did you grow up? Like, where were you from and originally?
I grew up in a small town called Sebastian, Florida. To give you an idea of that, still doesn't have a Starbucks within 30-mile radius of it.
Damn, no 30-mile radius Starbucks. That is off the grid.
No, it's painful when I go back and visit, because I'm the kind of I drink a Starbucks a day. That's one of the few things that has a monopoly on me for sure. I had two older brothers. We were always just into extreme stuff, playing in the woods and things like that. We had like swamp within 10 miles, river within 2 miles, and ocean within 3 miles. So that gives you an idea, I guess, of like all the kind of landscape and ways we did. So just anything kind of extreme, climbing, going through woods, whatever. And then skateboarding came about, which was first like a means of like transportation / we would skateboard. And then through doing the skateboarding, I just got more athletic and was, falling, but being, never breaking a bone or getting seriously hurt. So I thought I was pretty good at it, but I wouldn't push it as hard as some people. We actually fought to get the first skate park funded in our hometown. We went to the city council and did like a voting thing and got a skate park actually built. It took like 6 years after it was voted in. So I wasn't a super skater. I started skating again because of it when it finally was built and stuff, for that. And then there was a playground near me called the Creative Playground, which is very all wood, very cool over sand, like with tires and all kinds of stuff playground. So I don't know, that place just always came into my world, either just hanging out, skateboarding around it, or eventually I met a friend named Kane Sinclair, who later, when I moved to LA, was in LA and other things. But we'd be playing tag, and it'd always be like me and him not getting tagged in this park. And then it turned into he could do some flips, and then he showed me how to do some flips, and eventually kind of turned into one day, when he moved out to LA to do stunts in parkour. I moved out here and did the same. He eventually got on the team Tempest. I went a different way with WFPF. Um, but yeah, it was like, saw the show Jackass and was like, I could do that, but I could land on my feet. And then it was turned into what I was the first and only male cheerleader in my high school because I did wrestling the first 3 years, but I was tired of weight cutting and doing all that stuff, and decided to join cheer because we would clean the wrestling mats and leave. And when we did that, the cheerleaders would show up. So I had a good friendship with a bunch of them. And I had a trampoline in my backyard and taught myself how to flip. So they would just kind of give me the cheer direction of just, huck and tuck.
Okay.
And, just spot the wall and go as high as you can and just tuck at the top. And, the kind of training that I would never teach somebody, but it worked for me at first. So, also from wrestling, I was very confident. I was used to getting slammed under some other man's will and, power, and being able to like roll and not get hurt with it. So then it was like, I think if I flip and I fail, I'll just go to this, or I'll do that, or I'll do that. So it was a unique way to learn. So when eventually I saw a trailer for a movie called District B13 on TV at like midnight. And I went to the one movie theater that was in the nearby town, and they weren't showing it. And they looked it up in like a book that they had that said, "Hey, this is playing in Miami, Florida." So, which is like 3.5 hours away from me. So I said, okay. So I got a friend who went and saw that movie, like just drove down there that day. And I didn't even know it started playing. And I'm like, oh, I guess it's in French. But by the end of the movie, I was like, okay, David Bell, Sebastian Foucan, what is this? And I went home and went on the computer and found out what parkour was. That's when I stumbled upon the Sebastian Foucan's what is free running compared to parkour? What is this to that? I'd heard of 3 run before that, but I didn't really quite know what it was, or it didn't have that philosophy or anything like that, or words to express what it was. It was just what I was always doing, just big flips and stuff outside, and just kind of just I guess doing what they call parkour now. So when I found out what it was, I said that's so cool. That's what I do. I'm actually an athlete, I guess. This is something sweet. And that eventually led to me moving out to Los Angeles to try to do it after the James Bond movie, Casino Royale, because I was like, okay, this is definitely happening in movies. Mm-hmm. I grew up loving cinema. Florida's got nothing going on. And I drove across the country, and I've been here since 2008.
Wow. Epic. Yeah, that's a wild story. I know that cheer, I don't know if it's cheer like big in Florida.
It is. I'd say, Florida, North Carolina, or South Carolina, I forget which one exactly, and not to be rude. And then Texas, it's huge.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I would have rather probably grown up doing gymnastics, but there's nowhere to do it. And to me, the cheer is a bit more fun. It's like, oh, that's how you do it. That's cool. Not, this is how people did it in the 70s.
I've noticed there's been a little bit of like, I just realized a pattern. Like, I was like, damn, this comes up a lot. People that I know that came out into parkour from Florida, there's a lot of them that are hovering around that cheer community before they entered into parkour, or were in cheer, or still are, or whatever. So I was just like, oh, I don't really know that much about it, but it must be big down there.
Well, the big reason that it's like, for me knowing, like the obvious reason is, if you are a high school male cheerleader, the chances of you being able to get a scholarship at a college to some degree to be a male cheerleader is very high, and very easy to obtain, because there's like 5 major colleges in Florida that have massive football and basketball teams, and they have big cheer programs. So being a male cheerleader, you got a good chance. Like I was offered, I didn't even end up graduating. I dropped out for whatever reasons. I had my equivalency and all this, but I just time and things. But I was even offered like potentially a half ride to 3 of the major universities if I was on their cheer team.
Wow.
So for me, that was like I thought was like a big reason of why probably it's very there's a lot of opportunity there. Like it can open some doors.
Yeah, interesting how it trickles down all the way from like those big NFL teams and universities.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that little aside, a little educational node. So then, all right, in 2008 is what you said. You moved to LA.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, even behind you have some of your accolades and stuff. Like, how did you end up becoming involved? And like, how did that relationship originate with WFPF? And then, all working, I don't know if you worked your way up or if you were, from what I know, you weren't like a founding member necessarily of the company or the organization. So then how did that relationship develop? And then, you getting involved with the Ultimate Parkour Challenge, like that was obviously one of the big, high water marks for a long time.
Yeah, I stole one of the targets from the final episode at the mall. Yeah, I had a jacket because they weren't giving them away. So what, 2008? Yeah, picked up, moved here. Only knew my friend Kane, and just hit the ground running to see how it works. We ended up training at a gym called Gymnastics Olympica, and that's kind of where everybody came for these open gyms, which was actually one of the easy ways for me to move here. Because when I came and visited, I met the manager of that gym and was just shooting the shit with him. And it leaked, hey, this Saturday I think it was like a Friday night, and somebody on Saturday called out and he was venting. And I go, I'll come teach it for you. And I was just visiting at that point. It was our spring break back in Florida, so I was coming and visiting. And he goes, you will? Like, who are you again? And I told him I'm friends with Kane. I teach back home. I'm just on my vacation or whatever, visiting to see if I want to move out to LA. I go, here's my teaching credentials, because at that point I taught gymnastics for about 3 years, gymnastics and cheer, boys all the way up to like level 14. The gym I worked at back in Florida didn't have any adult program or boys like after 15. So he said, yeah, if you come in, I'll give you open gym for next week while you're still here for free. I said, okay. So I taught class, and he loved me. And he basically then just said, yo, if you move here, I'll give you a job. And I was like, oh man, okay. So I took that as a sign. I called back the gym that I worked at in Florida and gave my 2 weeks notice. And basically, when I get back there, I'll give you, from that point, I'll give you 2 weeks notice. I'm going to move out to LA. And they were like, oh, the owner of the gymnastics side was very happy. The owner of the whole gym was not happy, but whatever. So when I moved out here, that helped me just get to feel somewhat comfortable and have something to work at. That's where apparently that gym is where everybody came to train. So at the time, there was no joining all movement. There was no Tempest. There was none of that stuff. So everybody went there.
What neighborhood in LA is it? Or was it?
That would have been like close to Van Nuys, not a very good neighborhood. But they would it's the first gym I ever stepped into that like they let you do almost anything. There was like a rec side and a team side. You couldn't do anything you want on the team side, but the rec side, like pretty much do whatever you want, which is pretty cool. So I met there like a bunch of people went in and out of there. So like Tempest was training there before they were Tempest, or not before they were Tempest, but before they even had like t-shirts, before they were I Free Run LA wasn't out yet, which is like their first kind of major team video. That hadn't dropped yet. I remember when that finally dropped and everybody was like, let's watch this. So we were training with them. And then, like I said, my buddy Kane was there, who eventually, joined Team Tempest in like the second phase. All of the second phase of Team Tempest were like my friends. They got on Tempest, they did that. And then by a certain point, White Lotus opened up, which is Travis Wong's gym. He was there with King David. And he just basically goes, you want to work under King David and teach our parkour program. So that was the first parkour gym. And I taught there for 2 years under, like, in my opinion, like America's OG parkour guy, King David. And that's where I really learned so much about teaching basics, teaching strength to movements, teaching the mind. You got to believe you can do it more than the coach telling you can do it. Just different stuff that I wasn't necessarily taught in gymnastics as much, or explained, here's why you want to do this compared to do it. And then Tempest opened up. I was there for about 4 months. It didn't super work out. Before that was MTV's Ultimate Parkour Challenge. So how that came to be, Travis Wong was a judge in the pilot episode. They moved him up to be the host. When they asked him to be the host of the show, uh, they asked him, "Who do you recommend?" You were the only judge that nobody came and complained about from the community. Like they had a bunch of other people as judges, like William Spencer, who a lot of people just thought was a skateboarder. Obviously, now with William Spencer, do you know who William Spencer is?
Yeah, I mean, from what I know, he's actually a Denver native originally as well,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
he's
actually he
got a
is. Yeah,
little
I forget that.
special place in my heart, just representing the area code.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And also, and similar to you, I started in skateboarding, so there's a whole conversation there. But
Yeah.
yeah, fan of William.
Anyways, everybody was complaining to the owners of WFPF about who they picked for judges, except for Travis Wong.
Hmm.
So, and I've always thought WFPF is very good at listening to criticism and being like, okay, so everybody else is getting complained about. Let's not bring them back, even though they're a professional. But okay. And they went to Travis Wong and said, "Who do you recommend?" And Travis put my name in the hat. So then uh, at the same time, I was asked by the stunt coordinator of the show to come assist stunt coordinate some of the episodes to help him because I was one of the few parkour people that really showed like safety first. I was one of the first ones in our group, to be like, hey, let's go test that roof before we jump to it. Hey, let's spray this thing down. I found some clear adhesive spray. Let's spray this. Let's bring this around so we can spray it and not slip on shit sometimes. Let's hey, we're shooting that. You're not seeing the ground. Let's do a mat. Like I was one of the few to kind of do that. So he liked that. So when I was on the season doing both of those things, I think WFPF was pretty impressed with me to see that I could judge and I could do the safety and I could do parkour. And I was just professional and not, I would do anything and I just wanted to help. So when the show wrapped up, at the wrap party, I actually went up to the owners of WFPF and I said, "Hey, I'm very impressed with what you guys did. I enjoyed working with you guys. If we could do anything together in the future, I would like to do that." And from that, they presented, that they got an insurance company to offer insurance to parkour businesses or gyms or whatever, but the business itself wanted a certification. So they asked me, Ben Jenkin, and Daniel Arroyo to create that certification so it could work in gyms and outdoors and it'd be safe and progressive enough that the insurance company would come and approve it. So yeah, we started on that and that's developed to 1,400 certified instructors across the globe, as well as we insure 65 gyms in the US, about a half dozen in Canada. And we've been trying to get into the UK, but it's very weird with their sports governance program.
Hmm.
So because the certification came out, it was a pretty big boom. Gyms wanted equipment, so I started developing some equipment for that. Where I always saw it as kind of like the pros and cons of owning a gym. I'd see these big parkour gyms, well, like a few, and they had they had stuff that nobody used. It couldn't move. It cost a lot. So I was already thinking like, okay, like Legos or something that you could build different stuff. Number one was like the big thing I wanted, as well as I remember the first big roof that I went to that I was intimidated to jump. I looked at it, I saw it, I knew I wanted to jump it. And I went to the gym that night and found a way to recreate it, like the exact almost kind of run up with the drop and everything. So when I then went back to that place and I did it, that was one of my first times really like going to something, being scared,
Mm-hmm.
and finding a way to recreate it somewhere else and work up to it. So then I thought, well, that's obviously like as a business and as a practitioner, that would be the most useful thing to bring to that world. Because I've been to a lot of parkour gyms where there's kind of like basics and then there's advanced. There's not too much in between, or vice versa. It's all practice and then there's other things. So we developed an equipment line called Integrated Obstacles and Pop Up Parkour, and it's all modular. Indoor, outdoor. We even have like the pop up parkour has no bolts or screws; it just presses together. So we have people that literally go like park to park and they just put it in the back of the car. When I lived in New York City, I literally just brought it around in a cart through like Central Park and set it up. And that's how the equipment came to be. And then obviously competition started blowing up from having these gyms, having this equipment, having these certifications. So the idea with the competitions was always try to evolve it. So over what 10 years I've been doing competitions with WFPF, either indoors, outdoors, gyms, colleges, regional qualifiers, onlines. We were on an 800-year-old mosque in Turkey to do the first World Parkour Championship, 17 countries. I built a course on the roof of that 800-year-old mosque.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's those things eventually came with the 10 years that I've been with WFPF.
Okay. Busy man over the last 10 years, it seems like. I mean, to me, yeah, you're doing a lot,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
putting on a lot of things together, clearly. And man, it's hard to even like know where to jump off from there because there's so many good little
Yeah.
meaty points.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm curious, I guess, like what's kind of like, how have you seen the evolution of, obviously what I was kind of pointing to earlier with, the Ultimate Parkour Challenge.
Mhm.
That was like this huge moment in parkour. There's been like waves, and we've seen competitions blow up like that one, and we've seen Red Bull come and go almost. And how is the trajectory of parkour culture sort of like, how have you experienced it? And like, have you seen shifts, and what do you see coming?
Coming, that's a tough one. I don't know.
Hmm.
Coming, it's all going to depend on bigger things in the world. It might go back to the streets because what's going on with bigger things in the world, like WEF, World Economic Forum, and things like that, lockdowns, things like that. Because businesses, I don't know if they're going to be able to survive, which is kind of sad. So it might just go back to the streets. And I think if it goes back to the streets, it also won't, people won't be able to make a living as much or grow as much. So, or they have to do it in different ways. For me, seeing it grow, I actually think the highest point probably wasn't, I think MTV was the highest point. And the thing that I've always respected and appreciate the most with being a part and working with the WFPF was they use the word parkour in everything. The word parkour is front and center. It's the ultimate, like they fought to have the word parkour in the title. MTV was definitely trying to push all these unique names, that would be similar to like Jackass, which they were trying to do, or Nitro Circus. They were trying to find these like stunt type words and names. But the owners of the WFPF were just like, the word parkour has to be in it. And that's one thing I give them props for, because even like Red Bull doesn't do that. It's the art of motion. Other teams calling themselves certain words and stuff. I think it just adds confusion and dilutes the brand. So that's a big one. A great example is Casino Royale. Everybody, if you say the word parkour and people are like, I don't know what that is. If you say, hey, did you see Casino Royale? They're like, oh, it's that. It's because like they've seen it. It's everywhere, but people don't use the word so much. Ninja Warrior is a good example too. Big siphon from parkour. Tag right now is siphoning big from parkour by not putting at least the title in it, in my opinion. So
well, there's a whole, I mean, I'd like to, I'd open that up with you if you're down, because because the argument from people that don't want to use the word, for example, is that, well, parkour can't be competitive. And even if it is like competitive, like it's so hard
to define.
It
can't be competitive. It was about running away for your life. How is that not competitive? Somebody wants to kill you and you want to survive. Tell me a bigger competition.
Well, I don't know if like everyone would agree that that's like where it began, is like running for your life. I mean, like there's so many different ways to interpret it, right? So that's why I want to kind of see what your thinking is on it. 'Cause some people think parkour is like this prehistoric thing, right, that existed in animals before we even evolved as primates into human, beings or whatever, okay. Homo sapiens. And in that context, yeah, you could absolutely say,
what were they running and moving
it's the
from
ultimate competition. For? Yeah, you could say, yeah, survival wise, this is the ultimate competition. And and that's a compelling argument, I would say, a compelling perspective.
I don't think it's an argument. I'm not trying to argue with anybody.
Sorry,
but I do think it's the truth, and obviously somebody might have a different truth, and that's okay, I guess. Yeah. But that's like what you talked about earlier. Like, that's how I see it. If you see it another way, okay. I think also parkour can be whatever you whatever you want it to be for you, but I wouldn't suggest you push it on other people if they don't want it to be that. Like I know tons of people that have made a great living off the competition side of it that would not be able to pay their bills or live their dream if it wasn't a competition. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not, I think all the anti-competition sentiment is more or less gone away, over the years. I think that is one of the shifts that you can kind of markedly track is it seems like that's what the community has wanted from for a long enough time that it's like, yes, we understand that there's there's another interpretation of parkour maybe it's more of an art form and it's more of like a discipline. It has more philosophical implications involved, like the kinds of things that you learned from King David, maybe, back in the day that, aren't necessarily able to be reflected in a competition format, except, maybe not in the rule set, but in like the experience of it, whatever, or in the participation of it. But anyway, I'm just saying like, so siphoning off, like, so with Ninja Warrior, it's like, yeah, to a degree, it's like, yeah, there's parkour kind of like in it, but I would never call it parkour per se.
Or I would say it's practicing parkour. It's training for it.
Okay. And then with World Chase Tag, I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, not Ultimate Parkour Tag, although either one.
I mean, we could say either. I mean, Fernando Arce won that. He's a free runner, professional parkour guy.
And
Ninja Warrior, Tim Sheaf set the record after never stepping foot on a course. It's just because he did parkour, that he showed up and set a record his first time. So to me, both of those things are just, I played tag, and that's how I learned a lot of parkour growing up. We would just play tag. So there's a way to put, our climbing and jumping. So I'm not, I don't know.
I don't either. This is I
grew up in skateboarding. You did too. At first, it was a means of transportation. Then it was, hey, it's faster than picking my board up and walking down these steps if I just ollie this bitch. What's also, it's same with I was there for the flipping part of it too. Flipping's not parkour. Okay, well, when I'm running at that wall, I can just side flip over that thing and I don't need to vault it. So, and I can do it faster than you can Kong it. So what are we talking about? Like, also believe me, if I can, wall double full, I can also do a climb up. Like, also why I climbed up, so I could get on top of that and then I could flip off of it. Like, what I don't understand these like putting in the boxes so much. It's just that this is what it is, and it's like, okay, that's to you, that's okay. This is what it is to somebody else. You could say their parkour is not good if you want. I mean, you could say you're not good at parkour as me. Okay. You could say, to me, it's also like it's a martial art. You could go fight jujitsu, or you could just train it. You could go step in an octagon. You could not. You could go hit a punching bag. You could not. To me, it's like, why is it this in this box so much of what it's not supposed to be?
Yeah, I mean, supposed to be is a hard thing to talk about, right? Because who is anyone to say what it's supposed to be, right? Other than maybe, you can make the argument, okay, well, the Yamakaze or David Bell or Sebastian Foucault or some of these founding members, they're the ones who's supposed to say. But then you open up other arguments. I'm like, well, if it's this prehistoric thing, then why would they have any authority? I mean, there's authority. A whole. I'm not trying to.
That's funny too. Yeah, why would you want? I'm not trying to be rude. Why would you want authority over it? And then, too. Like,
well, typically they don't.
Yeah. Well, isn't one of those dudes in Yamakaze trying to run Fig?
I don't know necessarily. Okay, so here's the whole. Yeah, there's an archetype of everyone.
Yeah.
There's a. Well, that's what's so interesting is like it's still up to interpretation. I think that's why this conversation has still remained at least present, in across like, even, doing this podcast even for like coming up on 8 years now. Or
very, very
damn, man,
very awesome, man. Yeah.
But it's just so interesting that it's such a broad discipline, art form, martial art. Like we don't know what category it fits into, and that's one of the beautiful things about it. We don't really want it to be boxed in like you're talking about, I don't think.
I agree.
And at the same time, it's hard to do anything with it if you can't put it in some kind of container. So, you
put it in your own container. You put it in your own container. You've done this for 8 years, and this has to do with parkour, right?
The podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what if somebody said podcasting isn't parkour? Okay. But you've done it for 8 years, and it's because of parkour. So it's like, it can be anything, and I'm okay with it. And obviously some things could be good and some things could be bad. Some things I could say, I wouldn't do that with it.
Yeah,
Like
well,
there's those conversations and those times and things, but I did parkour without ever hearing, seeing, or anything of the Yamakasi.
mm,
I was every kid's done it before they probably, I mean, I don't know about now. YouTube's everywhere and in kids' hands and stuff like that. I had never seen it like purposely done the way like that, and I was already doing it as a kid.
mm.
So for somebody that's my age or near my age to say this is what it is, it's like, well, I was doing it before you without, or not before you. I was doing it without you. So who are you to tell me what it is to me? When I saw somebody said this parkour, I'm like, okay, that's the word of what I've kind of been doing. Maybe it's not point blank, but if me and you go play baseball, but the rules are slightly different, are we not playing baseball? Like if me and you go play basketball, we play horse. Like we're still playing basketball. Sure, it's not a team going point for point, side to side on a full, but like we're playing basketball. So
Yeah, well, and that's
I
like,
don't understand the like such a box.
yeah, and I don't, I think like that, yeah, it's hard to, because it's such a big term and because it's so powerful, I think in so many ways, it's so hard to find a meaningful boundary almost of, like you're saying, there's like, okay, in a basketball, it's like, if there's no basketball, you're probably not playing basketball.
We could just go dribble a ball if you want, try to take it from me.
But yeah, you could play with a soccer ball and it could still be basketball, right? And so then it's like, So this is like one of the beautiful things about life is like when you start asking these questions, you start to realize none of these things really exist the way that you think they do in their mind. And so it's just funny picking it apart. But
no, I love what you just did right there. You just threw even like a soccer ball into my basketball. No, this is great. Let's also put it this way: if parkour is not competitive and not competition, then I don't know what the fuck I've just done for 10 years. Let's put it
well,
that
and there's
way.
different ways to meet.
Since day one, I wanted to compete in it. I competed in the first American Art of Motion. I judged the second. I built the course for the third in America. MTV's Ultimate Parkour Challenge. I remember the day that I was invited to be on, to help somebody on a show. Didn't know what it was. I walk into a factory and there's Oleg Ilibaka, Ben Jenkins, Daniel Arroyo, Tim Sheaf. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? And they're like, this is going to be the show. This is what you're working on today. I'm like, I am. And I just met all these dudes that I've been watching online and never got a chance to meet. And within 5 minutes, I was moving like them, moving with them, going with them. And it's like, that's not just, I don't know, because we knew what the word parkour was and we knew what it meant and knew what it was. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why is it, I don't know. Well, if there was no competition, that never would have happened. That show would never be.
I mean, surely parkour is big enough to hold. Yeah, I mean, the pie of parkour is, I don't think anyone would argue, is not big enough to hold competition inside it as one of its like wedges, one of its slices. Sure. And, I don't think anyone even makes that argument per se anymore. I think it's interesting because there's different ways to interpret competition even.
Absolutely.
There's like I've heard to strive together. That's like the original definition for some people. And then for some people, they associate all these like egoistic sort of one-upsmanship and
sure.
My interpretation, and for whatever it's worth, it's just one dude's interpretation, is like it can be all those things, and it sounds like you're kind of the similar mindset. It's just like it is kind of what you make it. Everything is sort of everything when you try to pick it apart and you try to draw a strict boundary. Eventually, you just draw something more or less that looks arbitrary. But it is important sometimes to be able to try to speak about parkour in a meaningful way, and then in doing so, you invariably kind of like make a wake of inference behind you of like what people think you're talking about. And now, all right, now now people are thinking that's what parkour is, but it's like, no, that's just what one person said about it once. And I don't know. Yeah. I kind of like, I'm getting so metaphysical, I think, with it, but ultimately, I think it's just interesting because for me, parkour has, some specific application, and in my world, it means something. And also competition has been a big part of my progression for sure. So yeah, it's just, it's Nate. I think the nature of parkour is what people argue is like, it's not that parkour can't be competitive or that competition in parkour isn't allowed or shouldn't be allowed. It's that to understand parkour at its like most, for some people, purest level or something, they're going to say, well, that means like martial arts. It's just to make a distinction between martial arts and the UFC. And it's not that, you know, obviously UFC is martial arts, but martial arts isn't equal to, like you're saying, UFC, or you don't have to compete in X Games to be a martial or extreme athlete, or you don't have to compete in the UFC to be a martial artist. And people get worried about that. I don't know who conflates it that easily, but it's sort of like a non-starter, I guess, in some ways, because
no, I'm with you. And I honestly actually enjoy having these talks. Just sometimes, you know, I get not, I wouldn't say bored of having them, but I'd take a break from them because I've had them so many times and I'm enjoying it now. I haven't had it in a long time. But for me, parkour at first was obviously, okay, I'm just moving through my environment, efficient, effectively, and not being hurt and getting, you know, probably stronger. And then it's okay, I'm looking for specific obstacles to get over and whatever that I perceive are in my way or anything like that. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, I've run up this wall so much. What else could I do with this wall? And instead of it being an obstacle, it became a tool. So it's like, okay, what other cool things can I use? Can I do with this, or can I use this for? And it became that. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, what are the real obstacles? These are the things that are in my head that I'm thinking are in my way. Okay, what do I want to do with my life? And then you start thinking in your head with, you know, the same philosophical thoughts of parkour or idea, which is what, you know, I wanted the sport. I think the sport is more functional and real day-to-day in life than gymnastics, but everybody goes to gymnastics, even though they've built this whole makeshift environment around the movement they want to see instead of fixing the movement around the environment. So that's what I think are the big fundamental differences. So with parkour, it's the same thing too. So it's like me, okay, I would like to see people being able to make a living off it. Well, competitions is one. So I started building competitions. Then the other was, well, people need places to train. So it was equipment, insurance, certifications for teaching it. And these were the obstacles that I started seeing that the sport was having, you know, in its way of growing in today's world. I know some people like to take it back to like the founding people running through the woods, and stuff like that. That's, in my opinion, that's already been solved. Most people can do that. So how do we do it in today's world? And how do we get it to where it's successful, grows, and it's evolving and moving forward? And you know, I took lots of inspiration from other sports. That's one big thing. Even growing in the beginning of the sport, I was cross training a lot, and people weren't. I remember training with different athletes, and we would just go do sprints. We would just do floor vaults, and people would look at us like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, this is cross training this is how I, you know, fix my imperfections in a smart, safe, controlled place, and I bring it to the more advanced place. It would be pushing it like a profession. It would be growing it in different ways than just doing your best tricks on YouTube and letting people see it. It was showing progressions. It was educating the people that were new so they didn't make the same mistakes we were making. You know, it's those kind of ways of how I eventually started growing and thinking, what are the obstacles slowing down the sport from being what I perceive as probably the most useful sport for everybody on earth to know and understand better. So that's how I like eventually have evolved, I guess, with parkour, was just what are the obstacles stopping from everybody being able to learn and thrive with this discipline. So, I mean, and once again, that's just mine. And it's helped a lot of people, and some people don't like it or it hasn't helped. You know, that's fine. They've done it their way. That's okay.
I mean, there's always going to be, especially when you're doing big things. I've noticed that in this community in particular, there's a lot of, you know, it's partly because it's a burgeoning community. It's still new. It still feels like there's a lot of people being sort of protective over it, and also, you know, wanting to, at the same time, being protective, trying to kind of steer it the direction they're trying to get it to go. And, you know, WFPF, I don't know if it's pejorative to call it WFPF. People say that commonly, but I don't know if that's like,
I was there when King
I don't know if
David
that's
made it
like
up.
any, I've not talked to anyone in the company that's like, do you guys okay with that? Is that a fun?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was there when King David made it up. I was there when he presented it to like Dave, Victor, and Francis, the three owners at the time, and they laughed. There used to be a video that was very, it's pretty old, but it was called Legends of the Woof Puff, and it was just
Oh
all of
yeah.
those like first gen athletes just going ham. So it's a thing, whatever.
Well, you'd mentioned earlier that like you that company in particular has because of the things that it's been doing in the sport, because of like all the boundaries that it's helped to expand, and it invariably everyone that's I've noticed that invariably this is just something I think that's human. I don't necessarily think it's unique to parkour, but parkour is a great place to look at it because again we're a burgeoning community, we're young, we're kind of developing still, and you get a lot of there's like the kind of person that is able and willing and has the resources, has like the gumption, has the passion to execute some of the ideas that people will complain about because they didn't get it done the way that they see it. And so I know that there's been lots of negative feedback over the course. And you were saying basically that there's, been some, you think that WFPF does a really good job of listening. How do you feel like that, you guys work with that, and like, what's been your experience of it? Because, again, you've just done a lot, and you've continued to work with many of the best athletes in the entire discipline in a lot of people's eyes, and continue to push forward. So I'm curious, just from your perspective, what's been the experience and just like how you have experienced it, if you've experienced it, and then your thoughts on how you respond when that stuff comes through.
Well, obviously, I really appreciate this question. It's tough to answer. It's a broad one. It's a big one. And I don't want to be negative about it, which it is kind of easy to be. So this is also a reason why I don't do these things too often, is because you can't build what we've built and not had, pros, cons, good, bad, this, that, because you're coming into so many people's lives at who knows what time, and they're coming to your lives at certain times. And then the big thing is that I've learned is like how to fail forward. And what I mean by that is so many and I mean, a lot of people know me that I wouldn't say I'm controlling, but I'd say I'm confident in knowing what I want before I even start. And like the path, like kind of what I see in my head and what I want to do and stuff, I'm pretty good at that. So, but the idea is you also can't control what comes to you and how you have to then just fail forward at it. And what I mean by that was certain things like, the MTV show coming first. Like if that came now, we'd fucking murder that show. That show would be epic and great because I've had 10 years since that to practice so many things, understand. But at that time, I didn't even know WFPF. I auditioned as an athlete. Then they auditioned me as the host. And then Travis Wong's the one that proposed me to be a judge. And that's how I got picked for that. The stunt coordinator was the one that put me up to be the assistant stunt coordinator, not the owners of WFPF at all. So it's like how these things have come to be is sometimes you leave the project and some people want to work with you more, and sometimes people don't want to work with you anymore because it's the juggle, and it's like figuring it out as you go, and it's working with so many different people. Like to give an example of something, the park that I told you about that I just found out and released a video today that I designed, my first public park designed, built in Perth, Australia. I've never been to Perth, Australia. I would like to go, but we designed it right before COVID. They didn't even tell me that it was finished. I coincidentally found it. So It's these things that the guy that helped me design it, this friend Asa Kruger, who I met when we were doing a certification for a college in Minnesota, and he was going to the college to become a structural engineer for his engineering degree. He's since graduated, and they put on the first collegiate parkour competition at his college, and he did it for his like test. He built the parkour course. We did the first, and I think only in U.S. collegiate parkour competition. Like that's still in the history books. Since then, I've gone to him for advice on every course we've ever built because he's done parkour, certified to teach it, structural engineer, like all these things, So luckily I have somebody like him to fall back on and do things with and build very cool courses with. But like my where I'm going with that is 2 years ago, he volunteered basically to help me design that park when me and him knew nothing about what we were doing and just did Zoom calls with people from Perth, Australia.
Hmm.
They then said, okay, we got everything we need. We'll keep you posted. Never did. Me and him are still friends. We've worked on probably 3 projects since, all being like, man, what a waste of time that was. To just all of a sudden yesterday to find out, no, that thing's built. It's good. It's good. Here's kids playing on it. Like it's tough sometimes to like control the situations, and some people get let down when it's not within their control or didn't pan out the exact same way that they thought, or just the amount of patience and self-awareness you got to kind of have to be to roll with the punches that this lifestyle has given me. It's tough. Like I don't know a way to explain it unless you've kind of been it. A lot of the people that also, I guess, would say, hey, we don't like them, probably honestly haven't worked with us. Or if they did, it would have been like 10 years ago. It's probably like somebody through somebody that had a bad experience. And what is the real experience? I don't know. Like one time somebody got super mad at us because it took us over 30 days for them to get paid. And it was like 32 days. And it's like, it just fell through the cracks. Sorry, man. Like, like it's just those kind of things is the majority that I hear. Or somebody says, hey, I thought you promised I'd be able to do this job. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry you interpreted it that way. We reached out to you to say, hey, somebody's looking to hire somebody. Can we put you up for it?
Mm.
That didn't mean you get the job. Sorry, you thought that's what that meant that way. And then they just have resentment. And then sometimes, I mean, for me, I've fucked up. There's definitely been times where, working for somebody and I just misunderstood what the task was or the job was. Like Robbie Corbett totally was like, oh, you wanted me to, like I was working at one gym and they got mad that I was working at other gyms. And I'm like, well, you don't pay me enough to be here, and that's where the conversation then started to be, to where it's like, it was kind of a tribal thing and a territorial thing and a whatever. But it was one of those that's like, well, I have to pay my bills and I have to eat, and it has to be that way. Now, sure enough, I got fired from that gym, and I look back and I see why they fired me. I see why I was mad that they fired me. But I see why they fired me. Like, it just wasn't one of those things that, yeah, wrong place, wrong time, wrong whatever, I guess. It's the same with WFPF too. Let's talk about that too. People say that we're a monopoly. Tell me one thing we monopolized and said you can't go do this other thing. Like, ask any of the people that are ever on your show or whoever put it out there. Ask them whenever they've come to somebody at WFPF and they've said you're not allowed to go do that. I've never, as an owner, I've never told somebody that, unless it went against the contract that they had with us, that they were getting paid to do the thing that we're asking them, and it was already in writing and they signed and agreed it. Where, like, there's to give you an idea of also what I'm talking about. So we have a judge that literally did 2 of our USA Parkour Cups, brought his students out, judged our competition. The first year, somebody had negative things to say about him, had a talk and said, hey, this is what the athletes are bringing up. What do you think? And he said, oh, yeah, I could fix that. That makes sense. Okay. Then the next time he did better. Then he went and did a FIG competition last year. Is coming back and doing our USA Parkour Cup this year. Mm-hmm. I know FIG, the USA Gymnastics people just watch our USA Parkour Cup, take the people that win it and invite them to go do FIG competitions and compete in it. Mm-hmm. And then they do. I don't say shit. I put on every USA Parkour Cup. I don't say shit when people go do other competitions. I don't say you're not invited back. I don't message them and say, yo, that's disappointing. Why are you doing that? I can't afford, they can't afford not to do that. And I can't provide enough for them to not be able to do that. So I wish I could. It's not, it wouldn't be fair. So when people say WFPF is that, I think a lot of people don't push in, whatever. You can't put on anybody else, but I don't think people push them enough to say, explain why to me you think this way about WFPF.
Mm.
Explain why or where you heard that, stuff
Yeah.
like that. To me, it's normally it's pretty petty when you look at it, or it's old and in the past. And when you're trying to run a world federation, that what is partnered with 65 other federations in other countries that does what it does and helps how it helps, like things are gonna, it's not gonna be perfect by any means. So,
Well, I very
um,
much, yeah, I
yeah,
appreciate your answer. I appreciate your, just hashing that out and letting us all know your experience of it. And also, just, yeah, I mean, I can just tell that from my experience, I don't have much experience working with, I have pretty much zero with WFPF myself. And so for my judgment of it is there is none. So, and even if I was,
you can have
I'm
a
not,
judgment. You can have a
well,
judgment. Just
I
don't
don't,
hold it.
well, the thing is, I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious because I know that like it's probably been, you were talking about how like, okay, well, you're athletes that have athletes that have competed in the World Cup of the USA Cup or the World Cup competitions that you've put on. Like you got no issue with them taking part in FIG competitions or other grassroots competitions and there's
Zero.
it's just a very interesting time because like there's lots of organizations. There's Parkour Earth and there's USA Parkour and there's
We can
and
talk
there's
about that.
US. Yeah, I mean, yeah. What do you have any thoughts on that
Parkour Earth.
out of the gate, or do you want to? I'm just yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So Parkour Earth, in my opinion, has done more harm than good. And why I say that is International Parkour Federation was the first recognized federation to be able to work in the sports governance world many years before Parkour Earth. Parkour Earth did not Eugene, I forget his last name, who put it together,
Minogue.
Minogue,
Yeah.
put it together as a reflex or a reaction, sorry, to FIG. And what he actually did was then dilute the sport and help FIG. And what I mean by that is FIG would go to the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and say, this sport needs our help. We've been with you guys for 70 plus years in sports governance. We can help these guys the same way that like Wheels and whatever, I forget what that federation's called with the IOC, went and said, look, we can help skateboarding because they need our help. They've been around so long, but they don't get sports governance. If they come under us, we can help them, hence help the International Olympics Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what FIG's move. First, they claimed to be the first federation, which we could fight them in sports governance court and win. We were before them. The International Parkour Federation was. And just so we're clear, when I talk about International Parkour Federation, I'm just head of competition director. I only work with the IPF if they put on a competition. I help set up the gameplay, pick the athletes, the course, and so on. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an owner of that in any way. It's a nonprofit. There's a board, and I'm only on it if they're talking about a competition. I have no other say in it. Just so you know where I come from with the IPF and how that works.
Sure.
But I know sports governance enough to know that when FIG said that, they didn't have anything to stand on until they then went to Apex, and Apex worked with them, which made it not look good because they said, look, this Apex grassroots team and people want to work with us because they see the same thing. Then Apex bailed out, which makes sense because I don't think that they quite understood the gravity of what they did until it was too late, which is understandable. People make mistakes. But what the real mistake was Eugene then creating Parkour Earth, and he's fully aware of his mistakes because when he did that, FIG was easily now able to say, look, there's two federations. They don't understand it. Not only that, when Parkour Earth decided to hop in, Eugene decided to go with Parkour Generations and mix it. They had, first off, Parkour Generations had in their bylaws that they are anti-competition. So they can't be in charge of sports governance. They can't be in the International Olympic Committee because what do you think the Olympics want more than anything? Competition, right?
Yeah. I
Do you
mean,
watch the Olympics for the non-competitions? Do you just watch people talk in the Olympics and watch them walk out and turn it off as soon as the competition starts? No, you do not. So when he did that, it wasn't a smart move because it was very easy now for FIG to say, look how confused this federation is. They have two international
this federation or this discipline, like what?
This sport, look how bad IPF is. They can't manage these people. There's a billion ways that you could
But
take
why
it.
why
And
would
now
that
they have so much
I'm just
leverage.
curious, like why does that give them leverage? Because
So the International Olympic Committee is what puts on the
I,
Olympics.
I understand,
Okay,
like
they reach
I
out to
sort of understand.
sports federations
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
recognized within the sports governance world.
Mm-hmm.
They work with FIG, which is one that has all their disciplines underneath them. That's like, so FIG used to just be men, girls, gymnastics. Then they took rhythmic, and now they've taken, and then they took trampoline, and that's all underneath FIG. So
Yeah.
FIG just goes and talks to IOC, and the IOC says, we're going to give you this arena. We can give you this much money. We need
Mm-hmm.
this much time of television.
Yeah.
And FIG says, okay. Then 4 years go by, the Olympics happen, they watch back the data, and they say, okay, a lot of people watched FIG stuff.
XYZ, yeah.
Let's give FIG more money.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get more FIG shit in there. And that's what FIG does. Okay, let's go to, now people are watching less gymnastics. So FIG goes, let's go take other disciplines. They went for breakdancing, they went for pole dancing, they already tried for cheer and lost, and then they went for parkour. In my opinion, number one, parkour shouldn't be under gymnastics. It should be more under race. That's why we went to the Obstacle Sports Federation first and tried to partner with them in pentathlon, because I think the core principle and founding philosophy is more in speed, in racing, and then the freestyle comes with it after that. But that's a whole nother, but we can get into that differently. But because that happened, like that, FIG went to the IOC and goes, look, here's these sports that are going to be under us. And the IOC has to say, only works with who is the one governing body, number one, and it has to be the official governing body. So for FIG to go to the IOC, which we had talks obviously with the IOC, and they said, look, they're saying they're the official body. You were established before them, yes, but they're showing us that there's chaos in this and that they can help bring this together and help the sport. So
the IOC comes
works
to you and says, FIG
no,
told
we went
us.
To them.
Oh, you went to them. But
Correct.
Okay, so you guys are talking with the IOC.
Correct.
And you're saying like we're the federation, international federation. We're recognized, and because Parkour Earth was created, then FIG jumps in and says, look, they don't know who they are because there's two of them.
Well, they already did. They already said all that kind of first.
To me, that's just like a silly argument, though. Where does... Okay, I'm not saying... I'm just for FIG's case is like, they don't know what they're doing, but we know what they're doing. We should know what they're doing. It's like, why... I mean, I'm just wondering, do you understand like a little bit more about like why that argument is compelling, or is it just the fact that FIG is a big, huge, well-funded organization that they can kind of throw their opinion around and their weight around in that conversation, even though essentially like it's like, we're going to throw a third name in the hat because two names in the hat means they don't know what they're doing. It's or third hat in the ring, rather. It's like, we're throwing our hat in the ring because these two don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, it's just kind of a strange place to come from to be like,
well, just so we're clear,
degrade
Parkour
the
Earth
idea.
Is the third hat that did that. They were the third one in the chain.
Oh, so you're saying, okay, originally it was IPF.
Yep.
And
then
FIG in conversations. Yep. And then when Parkour Earth came along, that is the third hat in the ring. And so, but why would that give any extra credence to FIG?
Well, first off, Eugene went and had meetings with Watanabe, the head of the Gymnastics Federation of FIG to some degree. Mm-hmm. So that did it and went there on behalf of acting as if he is the leader of the world of Parkour Earth, which is the federation in his eyes. So there's that. That does confusion, obviously. And then two, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, works with the heads of sports federations, and they would like them to have as much control as possible. Like, they go talk to the aquatic. They talk to the main people that then have everything that happens in the pool. Okay. Mm-hmm. Another big one, since you come from skateboarding, skateboarding got fucked because they couldn't make their own within enough that now they're with like bikes, street luge, and like 5 other sports that they're in the mix with equally, where all the money's getting spread equally. The power is getting spread equally, and it's just gonna not. I thought really
there was a huge uproar about that, and they did not succeed. I didn't know. I guess I didn't follow it to its end. I thought when like
I
some of
think
the
they've
big names
definitely
got involved.
succeeded because I think you're also thinking like SLS, which was kind of like the sub branch of it, which is more the for profit.
No, no, I know,
Um,
I understand the distinction there, but I thought, I guess, I didn't follow the story, but I thought that maybe some bigger names like Tony Hawk himself and other people got involved, and they were able to establish a unique discipline for skateboarding. But I guess that's not the case.
if they have, then no, you absolutely could be right.
I
But
don't
yeah,
know. I don't
we
know.
need like we need a guy on Google on the side, just to fact check
We
me,
need
and
come
you
on,
keep us.
come on, Google guys, where are you?
We got to invite the third person to be checking in for us on that stuff. But from
But
my
to that, yeah,
understanding,
go
that's
ahead.
how they got screwed, and that's also so what we number one of talking to the IOC and talking to Sport Accord, that was a big deterring factor to give more leverage to FIG to say the athletes of this.
Where were we? We were just talking about the competition, the whole relationship, the interplay between Parkour Earth, IPF, and FIG, and you were kind of explaining
Well, we didn't
where.
quite get to the interplay yet of Parkour Earth and
Okay,
International Parkour Federation, but we were just more talking about the broad of where I would say Eugene making that move, I would actually say was a setback for the sport of parkour. Yes, in the sense of it being able to go to the Olympics, being able to have professional athletes have a chance at it, and then also having the right leverage. Because what we can get to the other kind of point, which is the big thing was like the MOU, which was here was once again another way. The International Parkour Federation sent Victor Bavine over to go talk to FIG's president, and they within 4 hours were able to draft together an MOU, so a memorandum of understanding, which the president there signed that says parkour will be what's the word? Let me think about it real fast. I'm gonna burn it. Sorry, I don't want to burn it. Parkour will be autonomous as a sport and a business from gymnastics, which a lot of people don't understand what that necessarily means. So when they show the MOU, they're like, they've partnered with FIG, they're going to do this. They're going to first off, an MOU is just, do you know what an MOU is?
I don't actually. I mean,
Okay.
I know what a memorandum. I know the phrase. I don't know exactly what that means
Yeah, yeah.
legally or whatever.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. And this is like the thing, not to discredit the parkour community a lot, but a lot of people just don't, when you get to certain levels of working with world federations that have been next to the Olympics for 70 plus years and stuff, there's a lot of legality and there's a lot of you have to be on your toes. You're messing with, like, you're playing with some gorillas in a big cage. So that basically just says, hey, we're signing a contract that's not legally binding by any means, but it's like a handshake on paper, is if you want to think about it. That just basically says we will keep discussing how we could potentially make this work together with more conversations based off what we've signed on here, which is parkour will be autonomous from gymnastics as a sport and as a business. So what the IPF agreed to try to communicate more with FIG is we will work beside you. So if you have FIG and then you have all your disciplines, we will be over here. We won't be under. IPF will be here. And it's how can we, because we've already done competitions alongside cheer competitions, like we did our jump offs in Vegas for 2 years. We were right beside a cheer competition. The second year was cheer and tricking. And then the USA Parkour Cup, we do in an arena that has a gymnastics competition on one side, judo competition on another, trampoline on another. So we're always down to find ways to partner like that or be in those kind of events. And that's what our deal was that no gymnastics business, gymnastics coach, gymnastics athlete would be able to dictate a parkour business athlete or whatever. But we obviously saw that there was potentially some very good positives to working with FIG of getting the sport into the Olympics. They've been in the Olympics for 70 years. Probably can learn a thing or two from them. So that's what we attempted to do with that MOU. And that's it. Was just, let's talk more and see how you guys can benefit the sport and how the sport can, benefit you guys. But that's where we went with that. And then obviously, we had a similar talk with Eugene about how once he developed Parkour Earth, how can we do that together? And the big consensus back was IPF and WFPF should come under Parkour Earth, even though we, were established for many years before them and had actually put on, at that point, dozens upon dozens of competitions from regional all the way to world, as well as our certifications, as well as our other accolades and things like that. So they weren't interested in doing something like that together. It was either all under Parkour Earth or nothing. So that's where I think, Parkour Earth has set the sport back, actually, for the people that want to compete, the people that would like to be able to be on that stage and do those things. I think that's where they set it back.
I was talking with on the very previous episode, actually, Corey. I don't know if you know them, but anyhow, one of the things that came up, it's not really so super relevant, but it is sort of just a question of just, are we ready? Do you feel like as a community, are we ready for the Olympics? Is there a reason that there's been some sort of, because there's, to me, one of the most fascinating conversations that comes up, and I'm not trying to necessarily posit this as like, this is my position. I just think it's an interesting question is like, there is so much changing in our world, right? Changing in like the zeitgeist, you could say. And Olympic parkour, or, Olympics in general have their place, but does it still remain? Does the future of, I know this is a crazy question in some people's eyes, but is like, do we even want Olympic parkour, or do we want parkour to?
First off, who's we?
Exactly.
There's definitely people that want to do parkour in the Olympics. So are we just pretending they don't exist?
I'm not pretending anyone doesn't exist. I'm just asking, I guess, is the
who were you talking to before this podcast? Sorry, Corey? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And this isn't their position. Cordelia Hollingsworth.
Oh, Cordelia. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We can talk about Cordelia. I know Cordelia. And I know her husband, Chris Hollingsworth, very well. Known him for many, many years.
Nice.
Had situations with Cordelia, in and out, positive, negatives, comings and things like that. Yeah. Okay, Cordelia. I know who we're talking about. I heard Corey. I'm sorry, so I didn't know who we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So am I speaking about what she said, or am I speaking about what you think?
This isn't what they've said. It's just that they have a number of people. This has come up across the podcast for me and in private conversations or whatever.
Of course,
there's something really powerful about what parkour could represent. I think this is this is like the best interpretation of somebody who's maybe not interested in Olympic parkour, or maybe is hesitant to it.
Okay.
Obviously there's to steelman that argument. It's like, why wouldn't we want to be a part of this ancient, just one of the most honored traditions in sport? It's like the epitome for many sports. This is the epitome of their competition. This is the pinnacle of what they do.
Sure.
And in some sports, it's not quite a living wage for those athletes, and it's
not a living wage for 99.9% of them. But neither is what Cordelia is doing for parkour athletes.
Well, I'm not trying to put them in the conversation right now of like as like someone to buttress your argument against or anything. I mentioned them because it was something that we talked about in the last episode. It just so happened to be something I don't even know their stance on it per se.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, but it's just an interesting question of like, well, what could parkour represent if it's a community that wants to, dissolve corruption, if it wants to dissolve, because in general, that's the narrative that's been coming out with a lot of these big organizations with sports, FIFA, IOC. Those are always these like glaring shadow aspects to them. Is like, well, they're always doing something shady. They're always putting, it seems like the bigger they get, the more there's controversy around it. And maybe it's just like we had talked about earlier, where there's sort of like a lot of speculation, but there's actually, if you look into it, there's not as much to complain about as what we all think there is. Or
it's a give and take. Nothing's perfect. It's exactly what me and you already talked about.
Or maybe, yeah. Or maybe it's worse, or maybe it's better. It's just an interesting question. I think it's worth visiting before, or just not assuming. That's all. Is, and then what does that
Yeah.
look like? And then,
Well, it looks many different ways. And this is something me and you talked about before we started the podcast,
mm-hmm,
which is I would like parkour to be a part of everything instead of saying, well, I don't know if that's right for parkour or whatever. It's like, well, I know personally thousands of parkour people that would love to be in the Olympics doing parkour.
hmm.
So, in my opinion, conversation's over. Let them go do it. Over.
Yeah,
It's over. The people that I hear saying that it shouldn't be there, in my opinion, don't provide enough of a path for those people to be able to try to cut that path off for those people.
yeah. I feel
Plain
you.
and simple.
So it's the same deal
I
as
also look
like,
at the sport. One second. I also look at the sport one way
yeah,
too. You can be in the NBA and never go to the Olympics, or you can do both, or you can do neither. I can just go play basketball on the street with my friends.
yeah,
Why, like, parkour is, to me, is bigger than the Olympics. So I don't know why people think if parkour goes to the Olympics, that's it. That's what parkour is now. That's not true, in my opinion, at all. And I honestly don't believe that. And I think I have pretty good insight from talking to the people at FIG, talking to the Olympic Committee, talking to the federation leaders, being in the sport for 20 years. I don't see it that way. I don't see it going to the Olympics and all of a sudden now everything's going to change and be different. I see an addition coming. I see more opportunity for the word to be commonly known by people and then to get an example of it in that space.
mm-hmm,
You know, like what got a lot of people into skateboarding? Probably Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Is that in any way reality to skateboarding? Absolutely not.
no.
So what?
Well, and
You
skateboarding and
know,
basketball are also very interesting because those are never, in my opinion, like as far as I can tell, they're never going to be Olympic sports. Basketball,
they
it's the
are
NBA
though.
championships. I mean, they are. Excuse me, they're not going to be Olympic sports in the way that like what is the one that I mean, like gymnastics is, or like
Sure.
swimming is. Where the best in the
That's been
world.
crafted
That's
around the Olympics. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, like there's sort of like a center of gravity almost of like where the actual weight is and maybe the biggest competitions are. Even like
Sure.
boxing is another good example where you can have in fact you have to have your entire career in Olympics competition before you ever go pro, and you can never go back once you've gone professional as far as I know.
Exactly.
And but I mean, your Olympic boxing record, I mean, you might have an impressive Olympic boxing record, excuse me, but at the same time nobody really looks to that as the epitome of the sport. They look to the big boxing promotions and the heavyweight belts and those
Completely with you.
organizations. And
100%. It's a
so,
stepping stone. It's a platform.
yeah.
It's a path.
And so
It's
I'm
not.
with
It's
you
maybe
100.
not the end all be all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think parkour is going to be one of those like swimming or anything. Cause again, I just don't see it falling as neatly as it needs to fit into an Olympic setting. Like Olympics, they have to be these very neat, tidy things because it is such a huge coordinated event that you're going to have some very clear boundaries and all that. And again, I don't know that for me, the center of gravity is ever going to live off of like a video or off of like, just influence even just in street training, like you're saying. But there are like opportunities for competitions in Olympics and outside of Olympics to have huge
Mm-hmm.
impacts on the sport and have huge
Absolutely.
avenues for people to take. And yeah, I'm with you 100% in the idea that like there's no reason to cut that pathway off to athletes if people want to do it.
You know, one of the best ways to get into the UFC is if you have any Olympic credentials in wrestling or boxing.
Mm-hmm.
You're now in the UFC. You could be in the UFC and you're going to get treated very well. You're going to get a very good contract to start. The highest pro wrestler in the World Wrestling Federation, I think his deal is something like $10 million for 3 years, and he only has to do like 20 appearances a year, is Brock Lesnar. And it's because NCAA wrestling champion twice. Didn't even have to get to the Olympics. They saw he was on that path and he was crushing it, and they picked him up. He also then decided to quit that federation and go straight to UFC, and they gave him the fucking green light because of those things. So it can be a useful tool. It can be a useful avenue. It could be a positive one, as much as potentially it could be negative. But that's everything in life. And yeah, I look at it too towards like, oh wait, it can be on Ninja Warrior, it can be on World Chase Tag, but it can't be in the Olympics. Like, why? That makes no sense to me. Like, why, you know, and once again, I speak, I'm not going to the fucking Olympics. I'm 36. I speak for the thousands of people that I know that are legit athletes all the way to maybe not legit yet, but dreamers. And I can also talk to kids that would fucking love to be in the Olympics. So if we just say that those people don't get a say or they don't get to live that dream, I'm out. Anybody who's saying it's not worth it for that, I'm out. And they can have their opinion, but like to me, no.
Awesome. And then the other thing I wanted to address, like, since we're on this topic, and you know, the big fear, I think that, you know, the last point that people like to make if they're hesitant towards this or whatever is that, well, when it is in the Olympics, let's say we all agree that we want it and we don't want to cut that pathway out.
We're not all going to agree.
Well, yeah. Okay. Let's just say that two people agree that that's the way we want it. And then, another fear that I hear from people, and I'm just interested to hear your thoughts because you are close to these conversations and you're in it. And so I think that it would really help some of these people understand, like, you know, maybe what their fears are, where they're coming from. If they hear somebody who actually knows the scene talk on it, is, okay, well, what if it's not, you know, they're like, if we're not going to get it perfect, clearly, obviously we're not going to get it perfect, like the first time around. But then the fear is that, like, well, now that's going to be what Olympic parkour looks like. And that's what everyone's going to think parkour is when it becomes like this televised event. And
you don't think they can go on Instagram and see a million different versions of parkour? They can't Google it and see a million different versions of it already? You think, like, I don't let these people that are so afraid dictate me. Like, all I hear from you is what these people are afraid is going to happen. I wouldn't have done 99% of the things that you've talked about if I would have followed my fears. I wouldn't have. They wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. Most of the stuff I'm not even showing you because I've done it and I'm so embarrassed on it. Thank God people don't know about it because I just wasn't able to succeed at it the way that I wanted to.
Yeah.
Anthony's Ultimate Parkour Challenge failed. We only did half a season. That's it. We couldn't figure it out because we kept trying to change the gameplay each time, and we were trying to do a learn while we earn idea of that show. Because when we were, first off, I wasn't in the full meetings, but when I got my input, you know, I was trying to say this is what it could be, and then everybody else was trying to say what it could be. And luckily MTV was just like, let's try it all. Let's do a different kind of competition every single episode. You know what I mean? And each episode got a little better. Some weren't. You know, some were like, okay, like when we went to Santa Monica, the first episode was really good on the rooftops. The second one, we were on the Queen Mary boat. Yeah. And that's another thing. Art of Motion, first time on a boat. Shut the fuck up. Okay, so Queen Mary's on a boat. Yeah, whatever his name is. Shut the fuck up. So we're on a boat and we're doing the parkour, and they want to do a speed race because they did the exact same thing you're talking about. Let's find a more quantifiable way to put it. Okay, let's do speed. That one was freestyle in the pilot. Let's go do that. And I looked at it like, hey, the pilot got 3.5 million views. Why don't we do what we did on the pilot again and just do that a little bit better instead of going segue into a speed race? You know what I mean? I was like, okay, whatever. They didn't listen to me. Hey, that's fine. Don't listen to me. And it not that I was right or whatever, because we didn't do it. I don't know if it was right. It could have been worse. But we did the speed race, and then we all watching it like, yeah, this isn't that cool. A freestyle would have been cooler on this boat because this place was cooler for freestyle. The next episode, we found it in between. Okay, we're at Venice. Let's do a speed, but they have to do 3 flips. Okay, so we tried that. We all agreed that wasn't cool. We went to the next one, which was like the castle. And that was all a freestyle performance. King David votes for you. Very cool. So, like, the point that I'm making is, or what I'm hearing from you is, and you're speaking on behalf of other people, which I totally understand. So I'm not trying to whatever. I do think, I mean, I'm all for it if it's up to you. Say their names because if I know them, you know, whatever. But
no, honestly, like.
But the idea is they're afraid it'll be this. They're afraid it'll be that. They're afraid of it. You can't let somebody like that control a sport because you know who else is afraid? The dudes that were going to have to go out to the Olympics and be watched by millions of people and be the representatives of the sport and compete in it and stuff like that. Like they're going to be afraid too, but they're going to go do it because they want to do these dreams, and it's not going to be perfect. What's the first vault that you ever did?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Was it perfect?
It was probably pretty shit.
Yeah. It
Although,
got better, right? It got better, right?
yeah, no, and I'm with you
Right.
100%. Like, I think my personal views, if you're interested in them, and I like, again, like you said, I don't necessarily even memorize anyone's names. I don't know who's what, where. I just felt like a slight responsibility to bring some of these points up because I know that some people feel this way. And I think it helps actually, it helps us all get on the same page if you have a chance to address them,
But we're not all
because,
going to be on the same page. This thing is way
well,
too big. It's way too
maybe
big.
not the same page in that we agree per se, but we at least understand where each of us are coming from, hopefully. And
Maybe
that's, I think,
coming
what,
from, I could
yeah,
understand where we're going. We can talk about it, but I wouldn't
yeah.
stop somebody. Also, I wouldn't purposefully or maliciously or whatever. I wouldn't attempt like so. Let's talk about it like this way too. There's a sport parkour league or whatever. I let it go. I don't say anything bad about it. I don't say
Mm-hmm.
don't go do that. I don't say don't do that competition. I definitely hear the other way of people saying certain people there say what you're doing is wrong, and I say okay, what are we doing that's wrong? I never say what these other people are doing is wrong. I never say don't go compete in their things, don't do their things. Um, so when I hear we're a monopoly or I hear these things, it's very confusing to me because I understand the definitions of the words and it doesn't correlate. And then the other thing too that I hear a lot is these other people that are supposedly leaders or whatever they are, is they're inhibiting a lot of other people from doing what they want to do with the sport. And to me, I don't agree. So I'm no longer in the space. Do I have the time, the energy, or do I even seem productive to try to get everybody on the same page? It's not going to happen. It's too
Mm-hmm.
big, and that's
Mm-hmm.
great. Like, what kind of phone do you use?
I have an Apple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this goes to what I'm going to say. I have an Android. And I love that. I love that there's not one way. If there's something fucking up with my Android, I can go your way. If
Mm-hmm.
Apple wants to hold back and be cunts for 2 years and not give some kind of cool thing because there's Android streaming, they have to. It
Mm-hmm.
helps everybody. If
Well, and there's that competition again.
it's not necessarily competition,
No,
they're
that
having
is one of the advantage
competition,
of it.
but
Yeah,
I, the consumer, am the one that's benefiting the most.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And that's how I
That's,
look at it. To where if you're a real leader for this sport, in
mm,
my opinion, you shouldn't be closing anybody's doors. Obviously, there's like going to be some gray zones. There's going to be some things that's like, I've heard gyms that have some weird things going on with coaches and students, and I say that's bad. If you tell me more of that, I'm going to like, we're looking into that. That's not good. Like, there's certain
mm,
stuff, no good. There's certain stuff about people like doing dumb moves. Like, you just kind of watch them and they do, like, I don't want to call them out, but you just do something, you're just like, oh, like, what you just shake your head and you say whatever. I wouldn't then like, I'm not the kind of person to then say what you're doing is wrong, this is so bad, like, or I wouldn't go tell other people, hey, don't do what they're doing. Like, I think that's petty. I think that's tribalism. I think that's also just not helping the overall sport grow. It'd be the same in my opinion too if telling people don't go do Ninja Warrior. That's helping Ninja Warrior. That's not helping us get a parkour television show.
mm.
Because when I was in pitch meetings for parkour shows, they kept saying, well, Ninja Warrior is on TV. Why would we do a parkour show? Tags on TV. Why would we do a parkour show? I didn't go tell people to stop doing tags, stop doing Ninja Warrior. That's not good for a sport.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm personally of the opinion that, yeah, I don't ultimately fear for the nature of parkour being corrupted. I don't really feel like it is corruptible. I don't feel like human beings like ultimately are, untrustworthy at like at the default, and therefore it should and will all work out in everyone's benefit, and we're all growing and learning, and we're going to figure it out. And yes, of course, like I kind of mentioned earlier, there's going to be some people that spearhead it that you're going to make some fumbles and whatever, but
Sure.
they are the only ones that have the kind of calloused and like high velocity nature maybe where they can enter that space. You have to have kind of a warhead on you if you're going to, enter into like serious territory to a degree. I mean, and to that counterpoint of my own like kind of setup there is just like, I do think ultimately the thing that I trust the most is the kind of gentle and kind and empathetic parts of the community that I see, that we are willing to listen to each other at the, and this isn't necessarily even something I think, again, that comes down to parkour or not. I think this is a human characteristic. I think those qualities shine through, and those qualities will help to build the right situations for everyone moving forward. And, you know, we will buffer out those kind of like sharp edges that we might create as we, you know, jump into, you know, the next evolution. There's growing pains, essentially, is all I'm saying. But
no.
There's a maturation and
a
polishing process for sure.
Yeah,
that happens afterwards.
Sorry, I mean to overtalk you.
You're good. You're good.
I think what you're saying is all correct. I resonate with what you're saying. Like, the other, like, the perspective too of being, you know, where I've been to look at it too is I know some people, like we talked about, I think it was before we maybe started, like how people act on commenting on Instagram or commenting on Twitter compared to like what we're doing now. I think, you know, is a big thing. And then another thing too is how you compare certain people in the space that they're at. So I know some people get on like the women's competition so much, equal pay. But a lot of the competitions that we put on, there hasn't always been equal pay for women's, but there hasn't always been the same starting line. There hasn't been as many competitors. There hasn't been as high of an entry. And then there's not as much participation in things like that. So then you also look at other federations and things that we're being compared to right now that took 10 plus years of success before they were able to do those kind of things. So let's look at UFC is a great example. 14 years before they had their first females competing. And the reason for that was because financially, in the way that it would work to grow in the smartest way for the sport, it took 14 years before the sport could afford to be able to respectfully and professionally do female in their sport. It took that long, and now they kill it. Mm-hmm. So many sports now are being forced that upon them, even though the sport itself, the organization, the operations, the community, the funds, the participation, we can even say the skill level isn't there. It's not mean that it won't get there, and it's not mean that people aren't trying, but it's still put up to this certain kind of level and standard. It's the same too if I go put on a parkour competition. I used to get more negative comments about the live feed, even though it was free. And people now no longer had to come to the event, no longer had to buy tickets, no longer had to support it. They could just watch a live feed that cost us thousands of dollars and many hours of operations, organizations, and brain power to put on, to then actually get more just negative comments there than positive. So I cut out live feeds for like 3 years. I was just over it. Said, no more live feeds. You come to our event, you see what it's like. If you have a say, then you've earned it. You've come here, you've seen it, you've done it. We felt it. The energy is where it needs to be for the people that have shown up. And we had a lot more, things were just a lot less stress-free there. So it's this, you know, and then I saw, like, to talk on that too, is NAPCA all of a sudden just added pay-per-view, which is, I thought was great. And then what did people do? They complained. Why? I shouldn't have to pay for this. Why? People are putting energy, time. It's going to the athletes. It's going to the production. It's going to stuff. So it's, when I look at it too, is I think a lot of where I'm getting at with this is people, what are they comparing WFPF to, number one? And then what are they actually doing? What are they actually doing that's giving to the federation that they should be expecting back? The majority of the people that I talk to, or that I don't talk to, that I hear about talking, don't buy our certifications, don't use the insurance, haven't purchased equipment, don't compete in our competitions, they don't do anything with us. All they do, though, is say what we're not. And it's like, well, why don't you come help us be that? And then, you know, the conversation generally stops there because it's something we're just supposed to magically do. And it doesn't necessarily work like that. I would love for it to, but it doesn't, you know? And it's that's where I'm trying. Based on what you said earlier, where I'm trying to come back from the perspective, which is for the majority with WFPF, people that have come to us and said, this is something I'd like to do with the sport. I would say more often than not, the answer back from WFPF is, how can we help you do that? It's maybe not, because it's number one, it's what are you trying to do with it? Maybe we've already done something with it, or we don't know how we can put our energy towards that right now with how we're spread. How would you like to do that? And certain people that I think you're getting these words from that have been on your show, I've been there when that person has come to WFPF and asked that, and WFPF has answered it back like that, and then certain things just haven't worked out. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily that it was bad, in my opinion, that it was like, in my opinion, it wasn't bad. It was just people trying to do something together and didn't work out. Some people take it the other way. Some people go do it with somebody else and it does work out. And once again, that's a big thing that we haven't, in my opinion, created a monopoly in any way to say it's either with us or not. I think a lot of things are succeeding very well or growing. And it's not. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, ultimately, with the Samsung, Apple, options, people will flock to the platform that they like the most, and ultimately, there can be more than one platform that people resonate with, and there should be. That's another good point to be made is those platforms sharpen each other just by existing in the same kind of arena to a degree. They increase and expand the pie for parkour for athletes and to have opportunities to do things. And those athletes, the bigger the platform gets, the more you can do with it. If you are, successful, or if you work hard and utilize and adapt your parkour to that platform in a way that, is meaningful to the cultures. You think about these epic athletic figures in history like Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali, obviously, or whatever. But, some of the greatest figures in sport have had something to say after they've, risen to the top and done something with their accolades. And I think those platforms, they invariably, they can be a little bit corrupt, or not necessarily corrupt, but just like there's negatives and goods that come with it. I mean, Dana White, just had that infraction or that whole mess with his wife. He hit his wife on camera, not a good look.
He hit back his wife. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, not a good look for him or for the sport at all. I don't think.
But once again, that has nothing to do with the sport. That was him on vacation with his family in Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know exactly where I was going with that, except that, just to say that nothing is perfect, I guess. And even though a lot of us love the UFC and a lot of us love what that platform can do for an athlete, and it can be a huge amplifier for an athlete to have a meaningful experience, inspire a lot of people. I mean, it's clear that you're a fan of the sport. The end of the year, that Leon Edwards,
that was the comeback of the year. That was the comeback of the year. Moment, he was down he was down four rounds to one. Yeah. 100%.
And those moments are in my book, I guess, ultimately they're worth it right now. Even though that there's sometimes a black eye on the sport because Dana White had this, TMZ moment. And
once again, not to whatever, in my opinion, that has nothing to do with the sport. That absolutely has nothing to do with the UFC.
I would say that you could. It's quite possible that it has nothing to do with it whatsoever. I think that there's a certain celebration of violence that I participate in. Okay. That is part of the culture. It's woven into the very fabric of combat sports, and
I would say mankind.
I think, and probably that too. And then with that, there's going to be. If we have a value of that, if we celebrate that, which I do, then there's going to be little expressions of it that go on that are not acceptable, essentially, or just they're not good. him hitting his wife. Not good. Not a good thing. Not something I would ever condone. And I don't know that it's
I don't think anybody does, but what does that have to do with UFC?
Well, I would say that I don't know that you could argue logically okay, you're not going to be able to connect the dots one to one. But I would say that if you're living your whole life in combat sports and you're surrounded by violence, it might be something that's influential towards your likelihood to commit kind of domestic violence or any of those things. I mean, we've seen that in the sport, that there tends to be lots of, when you celebrate dudes being super violent and aggressive, eventually that's going to leak out in areas. And unfortunately, it sometimes leaks out on their families. And if we're not willing to I think it's not a one-to-one. I'm not saying because we should abolish the UFC, we should abolish the sport, we shouldn't, have NFL or any of these sports just because a few bad apples or whatever can't keep their aggression contained inside the octagon or on the field or whatever. But I do think that it is something that happens because they're in that culture and because we celebrate aggression. If our value structure...
Have you seen the video? Do you know what happened?
Yeah, I saw the video.
Okay. What happened?
They were in a club. Mm-hmm. They seemed to be not having a good time. Then his wife slaps him. He slaps her back and then continues to slap her. I don't know. It kind of breaks out into a little commotion there. And what I would say again,
so because you feel because Dana White's been around fighting, that's what did that, even though somebody struck somebody else first.
Well, I don't think that it's acceptable that if whether or not she hit him first or not, I think is...
I'm not saying that.
Okay. But I don't think that, I don't think that really is relevant per se.
Okay.
If whether or not she hit him first, but the fact, she shouldn't have hit him.
Well, I'm just saying that's a family thing that happened. Obviously, it's a family thing. I don't see what that has to do with UFC. That's 20 plus years.
Well, it's just interesting.
That would probably would be fighting probably in bars, streets, whatever, are now at least in a place where they're agreeing to it, they're training for it, they're mentally preparing for it, they're getting paid for it, they're getting health care for it, all that stuff. I don't see how that, and I don't agree with that in any way, but I don't see how that has to do exactly with the UFC. I don't know. I think it's in my opinion, it's more of just marriage problems, which are in every facet of this world and are not right and needs to be looked at in a different way. I don't think that has anything to do with the UFC.
I think there's definitely an argument to be made there. Especially with that particular incident, because their history, because there's no reason to believe that there's any history of it.
I don't know their history. Yeah, I have no idea.
But I do think that there is. I think that there's more domestic violence in the NFL and in combat sports than there is in wiffle ball or badminton or any of these things. That's all I'm saying is
people in both of those things.
Okay, well, let's say even per capita or whatever. I would say that when you celebrate violence, invariably you're going to have some side effects in the culture, and I don't think that. I'm not trying to say that because Dana White was around it. Maybe
I see what you're saying.
It's isolated.
I'm with you. I'm on your wavelength.
But I do think that it's just something that we have to maybe look at as a society and decide again, to me, not necessarily. I don't think it's worth because it comes down to other things of personal responsibility and et cetera, where you can't expect society to solve that problem for you. And so I think that the spirit of competition, the spirit of even, people who agree and want to, set themselves in a cage and see who comes out the victor. There's something so compelling about that maybe it is worth, whatever small side effects there are until maybe there aren't any, because like you're saying, you're never going to get everyone. And
just that type of person that would do NFL or do UFC is somebody that is more of a fighter contact type of person than some of the other sports that are no contact. That's generally what drives them to that sport over, basketball, baseball, wiffle ball, as you said, stuff like that. So I think just that's that kind of person that, back in the day, they would probably just be in the Coliseum as a gladiator, they would be a bullfighter. They would be whatever traces back before UFC or before the NFL. In my opinion too, it doing the UFC or doing the NFL is similar but I think it's more mentally than physically. Then like I remember growing up, the big thing was video games. If I played Mortal Kombat, I'm now going to be I shouldn't, because that's going to make me a violent kid, and it didn't. In my opinion, I wasn't.
Well, yeah, it's again,
so
like
it's
the
that
fear-based.
that's where I'm more trying to talk to you about is like, I don't know. I personally think every human's flawed. I personally think obviously humans have made everything that we see. So if you think of UFC, if you think of NFL, if you think of whatever, it's the word derived from the person, the people are the ones that built it. So the more people you involve in something, the more likely it's going to be good and bad. You can't control this only good and only we've seen it, just like you said, so many documentaries, so many things of like the image of something, and now finally somebody that's a journalist or something goes in and cracks and finds that cancer, which is great because then they normally take care of that cancer and we're back to the positives. And then of course the cancer is going to, it's just the world that we live in is going to come back to those kind of things. So I normally just go into everything thinking there's a good and a bad here. What am I attracted to? And I think I'm a good person. So it generally goes towards the good thing. And then obviously if you see bad or no bad, you try to, I wouldn't say expose it, but you don't turn a blind eye to it. You don't just say, I didn't see it. Like, oh, I didn't know, like what another one's at USA Gymnastics. That to me, that was systemic within USA Gymnastics, the problem, not necessarily the other situation we just talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
like if we just look into each other enough, we're going to find like we already know that there's something that I don't like about me. There's something that you don't like about you. There's something that some person doesn't like about you.
Oh, yeah.
You might not be that person
no, everyone's
anymore.
flawed. Everyone's flawed. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
everyone's
if now
human.
a bunch of us all come together and try to build something, some of that's going to happen in there, and it's about controlling that.
And I'm just a speculative individual in general. I think it's like curious a little bit. It's kind of fun to poke these conversations open. I mean,
100%.
But because it is like I don't know. Again, I don't think one necessarily has to do with the other, but Dana White's promoting the slap championships all of a sudden.
I'm not a fan of the slap. I know what you mean.
And it's just like
that coincidence does not work well for him.
It did not work well. It's like, all right, you've never slapped. You've been married almost 30 years, never a slap once, and now this slap thing. All of a sudden, there's
that's
a slap.
True that you bring that up. Yeah, that perspective. Okay. No.
So that's all I'm saying.
This is what I like talking to you about too, because now I'd actually say, you know what? That perspective resonates with me. So I'm glad you didn't just like shut down and stop talking or be like, you're right, whatever, Robbie. You're like, no, that's a good, I mean, oh shit. I don't know actually now.
You never know, right?
You're right. No. Now you're absolutely right, man. This is a very good first conversation with somebody, I must have to say, Brendan. Like, for never talking to you, this is
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, you come in, and I really appreciate like your energy and your time, and I know that you do so much, and so I know your time is pretty valuable to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to accomplish
since October. So
yeah.
I've been trying to get you penciled down. 1 second, let me plug in my laptop. Saying it's going to die.
For sure.
1 second. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
And and just for anyone who cares, because I'm just I have some time to ramble here. I think Dana White did handle that as well as anyone could in terms of like responding to it. I don't know what's going to come of that, but he took it and he didn't make any excuses, and we'll see. Like you said, it's a private family thing.
For me, I have no idea. But, so just to be clear, like I don't know if he was drunk. I don't know if she was drunk. Not saying that negates anything. I don't even know that much is what I'm trying to say.
I'm sure they both were, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, I'm not here to point the finger and wag it at Dana White per se. I'm just, it's just something interesting to talk about. And it's something that fascinates me about culture, and especially because I'm fascinated with just like the values that might shift over time, with, even being the gladiator days, like we talk about, to now stepping into an area where we're like, okay, well, we're not going to let anyone die in the octagon. We don't approve of that anymore. And, but we still want to celebrate that level of.
Did you watch the Izzy Alex Pereira fight?
Pereira? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First off, amazing. I was like, in the, at the the bar place standing up and screaming because when the fight started, I wanted Alex to win. I always like, just so you know a bit about me, I like seeing the new guy come up and take it from the established guy, and then I love when the established guy comes back, and it's like that. You know what I mean? Like when
That's the story. Like, yeah.
I love when somebody's been the top for a long time, gets dethroned, but can take it back. I love that.
That's a beautiful story
that's
arc for
probably the
sure.
hardest thing when you've been at the top for so long and you've lived a good life for so long to lose it and come back. That's really impressive in my opinion of like a warrior, of a real true, just warrior. So when that fight was happening, I was really quiet, and then as the rounds got, like I'd hear somebody like say something like, okay, that guy's into Alex. Okay, he's not an Izzy fan. And then it kept going. I'm like, okay, that guy's not an Izzy fan. And then by the end, I realized like everybody there wanted Izzy to lose. So I was like, oh, sweet. So by the end of that fight, we're all like screaming, obviously, and like everybody's friends, but we didn't know at first because nobody knew each other at the bar place I was at. So it was a really funny experience. But where I was going with that is a lot of people complained because the UFC, they said, stopped it too soon. They're like, he wasn't completely knocked out. And it's like, I don't know what you thought about it, but for me, I'm like, he was good. He was about to get.
It looked a good stoppage to me. I mean, I've seen much worse stoppage than that. I feel like, you should stop a fight when somebody's getting that many blows to the head.
That many untouched blows. If you're looking after
the fighter.
Yeah.
The referee did his job for sure.
Yeah, so
I know that like there's the get out under shield and all that, and like especially when there's a champ, but that's too much to put on one referee. Like, well, you should really understand. I mean, we would love it sometimes if we'd let them go out in their shield because that can be really awesome too. And like you said, maybe he could have made a comeback, but
I doubt. Like,
it's unlikely. The odds are more. Yeah,
have you had a concussion?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've had 3. Over my life, and no, like you can rehab your body and come back in 6 months and fight.
Yeah,
but if you get knocked unconscious, like we don't know enough to say, oh yeah, that's 6 months and you're back. Like that could be forever, and the fact that it's like
it's a big
that the UFC did that, I thought was like, I thought it was props because I watched a breakdown where the guy literally like counted and showed in slow-mo too, like, is he doing this? And Alex is like over here.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, who's Izzy doing this to if you're telling me he's not unconscious right now if he's not actually rocked? You're telling me this is what he wanted to do? This was his defense mechanism? That was a sound guy? Yeah.
That is, I mean, again, nothing's perfect, especially when things are so wild, like in a fight like that. I mean, it's incredible how few of the fights are like that one wasn't that controversial stoppage, in my opinion. It was going to be controversial just because Izzy's such a big star. You're going to have somebody come out of the woodwork, but
sure.
Yeah, I think it's actually incredible how few endings and stoppages and things are. I think the judging definitely needs an upgrade. We saw some of like weird on that last card of the year. That was
we're in a good space
judging.
With that. Yeah. But, so you know how their judging works, right? With the athletic commissions and stuff, like.
Roughly. I mean, I don't really know how it works, except that I know that the UFC ultimately is not supposed to. They're not employees of the UFC. They're employees of the athletic commission, and it's different from state to state. And certain states have like better reputations than others, and having good judging and good. Representation of the athletes and good drug testing, etc. And other states are kind of known to have maybe some biases, and there's certain judges even that get like, there was a huge controversy with that last card, I think, of the year in December, where this one judge, had broken some of the rules where he had flown like overnight, essentially not had enough sleep as you're supposed to have in between fights. And he had notoriously had like all these shitty card readings. And so people are not really big fans.
You're super knowledgeable in this. Yeah, man.
But
impressive. Yeah, I didn't know you were so into it. That's awesome.
I'm deep.
We got a lot more. Yeah, we got a lot more in common than I thought, which is great. So yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. So the beauty that we have too as a sport is, I mean, before every competition, we try to announce who the judges are. We have judging certifications online that are more competency certifications. In all honesty, it's like, here's how we judge and why. And it's also about, here's how you fill out a scorecard. Here's what you need to explain to the athlete and the parents, so they're all on the same page before any competition happens. And what I do at any event that I'm at is bring all the athletes, and they're allowed to have a coach on the course when warming up if they want. And the idea is what I say first is, thank you guys all for coming to this competition. It's because of you and for you that we do these things. This is all great, and that's like, I'm not trying to rush it, but I'm just trying to get you to the part that I think has to do more with sports governance. Is then I go and I say, if you know what you want to do on this course that you're going to watch back in 10 years and be proud of, do that. The course is now your stage. Perform however you want, that you're going to be stoked about later. If you want to win, here's the rules. And then I say, execution, it's how well you dissipate the impact. You can roll, you can absorb, you can stick it. Any of those are all worth the same, as long as it doesn't look like you fell or hurt or, absorb you dissipate the impact. Next is flow, how much you don't lose momentum in your desired direction. You stop and pause, look left and right, you're going to get deducted. You stop, you're chalking up and you're huffing your breath, you're going to get deducted. You're stutter stepping into every single move, deducted. The flow's got to keep moving. It can be either with an obstacle, just your feet, rolling, whatever. That's what flow looks at. Difficulty is how you leave the ground and what you do in the air. If you punch on concrete and do a Rudy, it's the front flip is worth 1 point. The 1.5 twist is worth another point and a half. So you get 2.5 points. Now, if somebody does it from like a split, like an aerial takeoff, and it comes down to a tie, you'll probably get more points because punching that is more difficult than split stepping it, as we've just seen in our time. And then last is versatility. It's if you use each of the 5 events: bars, wall, vault, floor, and drop. So we make sure that you're a well-rounded athlete. So if you're just doing only what you're good at, only accentuating your positives and eliminating your negatives, you're probably going to lose to somebody who's more well-rounded. So that's like the gist of it. And then I say, now for the next 45 minutes of warming up, here's the judges. And I say what they're judging, execution, flow, difficulty, versatility. If you have any questions, go talk to them directly before you go. Show them your run, ask them how much this is worth, ask them if this is a bar skill or a drop skill, ask them, what this counts for, that counts for. Go talk to them, have them write it down if you want, record it while you talk to them. Because if after you want to bring something up about the judging, let's do it. So we try to, right now we're in a great spot as a sport because we can do that, where the UFC is not allowed to do that. Like the UFC is not allowed to really talk to the judges. The athletes aren't allowed to really go talk to the judges. Shit, even, the press isn't even really allowed to go talk to them. It's pretty tough. So I try to use the position we're in right now as much as we can to make it as good as possible and carry it, learn each time to make it a little bit better, a little bit fuller. Obviously, we have the certain athletes that complain that they didn't win. Like, no shit. Like, what athlete doesn't complain when they aren't the winner? Like, it happens. So there's no perfect way to do it, but we try right now, and personally, I try to find a way to get the judges, the coaches, the athletes, the comp director, all to be at least talking and working together as much as possible every single time. And that's like a luxury we have right now as a sport that a lot of other sports don't have.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's great that we can maybe up level the standard for judging and like having it be fair. Although, like we've been talking about with the UFC and with boxing and with FIFA and even the biggest, most well organized, biggest funded, biggest players, biggest like international superstar names, they're not getting it right every time, and there's always going to be upsets, and there's always going to be.
They never will. Yeah,
and it's just like that's probably woven in again to the nature of what it is, in that people are going to.
Well, it's what people perceive it to be. It's what people want. It's what is it really? That's a big question. That's really tough. Look at skateboarding. I mean, we'll go back to that. I love skateboard. Well, let's stick with UFC too. UFC used to have 0 time limits, used to have 0 weight classes. I think you just couldn't like bite, kick in the groin, and like gouge. Look how much they've been able to evolve and change and learn
Yeah.
all they've earned. And that's what, I try to emulate as much as I can, because that's the sport that I've seen in my lifetime that's done it the best. I would say the next one would be that I'm aware of would be skateboarding. And for me, when I started skateboarding, it was only in the streets. But I remember the first time I saw a half pipe on, ESPN or whatever it was, and I was like, "What is that thing?" Because I've never seen one of those. And then a year later, a guy built one, down the street, so we went and skated one. Um, and then that became the thing at the X Games. Tony Hawk, Bucky Lassick, Bob Burnquist, that was all right there.
Mm.
And then it went back to the streets for a little bit because Ryan Sheckler showed up, and it became like trendy to be a skateboarder for the first time. People were in Vans, even though they didn't skateboard. People just thought Ryan Sheckler was cute and hot, so they dressed like skaters, which is all fine. I didn't super agree with it, but whatever, it was fine. And then the next thing that I remember that was huge was all of a sudden people were talking about Bob Burnquist again. I'm like, why are people talking about Bob Burnquist? That guy was always like number 5 when I watched Vert. And they go, there's this thing called Big Air or Big Trick or whatever. And I go, what is that? And I watched. And Bob Burnquist, the guy that was always like number 5 for like 10 years in Vert, they created this new thing. All of a sudden, he is the man because they made this new thing. Yeah. And I always took that away as, okay, this sport is like street, vert, cool, like bowl, skate, back to street, back to vert, big air, downhill, all this stuff that I'm like, you think Bob Burnquist is mad that all of a sudden that they added this big air, even though he was number 5 vert skater for 10 years? Like, no, like.
Well, he pioneered big air as far as I can tell. He built that in his backyard, and that's why he had the. I mean, obviously, like that's fascinating to me because I love I love that whole story because it's kind of like you're saying. He was maybe never at the top, but he was close to the top, and then he kind of got
a good living.
He aged out because that's what happens to athletes. And then he was able to sort of make a comeback by inventing a whole entire like offshoot discipline of skateboarding that is extremely compelling because it's huge obstacles, like big features, big air, huge ramps, but only someone like him could do it because you need the resource to build these massive backyard ramps and stuff. And I think that's how it started. It was
becoming number 5 in vert for 10 years gave him enough money, time, energy, freedom mentally to then dream up this crazy thing in his backyard.
And it's like an old man
skyrocketed him, to being the skateboarding man.
I mean, and at least when it started, it was sort of like an old man discipline because it was so new to everyone else that he could just use the years and years of technique to do the right flicks and just, slow everything down and make something really good work on a huge big air ramp. And everyone else like just was still learning. And now it's like, now the young guns have come in probably and adopted it enough where it's like, all right, it's for freaks again, I
remember the first one.
But he was able to kind of like level the playing field again for himself by doing something that, wasn't such high impact, and you could wash out a big, until it is, and then it's really high impact. Yeah. So, but anyhow, I love that story. And that was another thing, again, just to throw it back one more time, just since it's been in there with Cordelia, was that was one thing we landed on, which is like, you got to open up lots of different competition styles because that's the only way that we're going to find like a place for everyone in the sport potentially. Or that's one of the ways that we find more places for more people is by, like you're saying, just opening up different versions. Do big air. What does parkour big air look like? I don't know. I don't know if that could be a thing.
Yeah, we've done it.
Jump. Oh, you've done it. Okay. What does it look like?
I mean, there's very few things, if you want to think of it, that I haven't at least dabbled in or explored or played in just with my own friends, my own circles, my own things. But we, with the integrated obstacles, we made what we called the ramp. And like the famous kind of like clip from it is Chris Hollingworth, her husband, doing the what is it, like the aerial, what is it, like a double aerial twist, or what's it considered? I'm trying to think, like a triple aerial twist, because an aerial twist is an aerial with a 180, so then he adds 2, so it's triple A twist to concrete, landing flat, screaming at the competition, so that, that's how we've kind of done parts like that.
Well, I only mean like, we've had big trick and big like do your biggest thing, but I mean, we haven't changed this very opposite. Well, maybe you have still. I'm not saying you haven't. I'm just saying like in order to create something like Big Air, I feel like we have to have, I think like Pasha's pinball machine is sort of like that, where you have like actually a different physics involved, where you're like, okay, we're slowing down time because we're on a slant. So you can actually take what looks like a bigger drop, or you can do more spins than you could do because you're kind of like on moon gravity. That's what I kind of mean. But
Gotcha.
Just
Yeah, I think for
I
us,
already
we
answered
looked
my own
at it as
question
what
then.
could we build that's like a kicker ramp per se, like that launch ramp, and then have the landing, but
Yeah.
it would still be considered parkour, and it's not, once again, like we get to this thing which I'm not totally against, like Ninja Warrior,
Mm.
or what's like the other ones, like they do like the airbags from something super high to like an
Oh
airbag, because
yeah.
you eventually get to like the human aspect of it, right? To where you gotta the human, like manpower is a great example. Like I would love to have got, and I still will to this day if the opportunity comes, get funding and just go to manpower with like the 10 best, and actually be allowed to be there and control it enough to like, let's set up some mats, you do your practice, you're all good. We're like, we're doing it smart, but also we're gonna go like how they do that kind of big air thing, and it's like actually controlled. There's insurance for it, so
Mm-hmm.
something happens that they're being taken care of, stuff like that. I would love those kind of opportunities and things. So, but for us, yeah, we've done it in a more controlled way, obviously, because I'm also a fan of that too. So like a big thing for me is I don't want athletes getting hurt. I've personally never broke a bone. Personally, I was a stuntman for 10 years, wrestler, free runner, done car hits, fire burns, high falls, concrete falls, like jump roof gaps, tick a box, done it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like that's the biggest thing is like I look at it like UFC. I look at it a lot like more like pro wrestling probably too than I think most people think, because it is a bit of a we have a bit more of characters in it than I think UFC has, of actually like people from different places that could bring their persona and make it more of a thing. But the idea is it is a little bit more controlled and hopefully story driven, not so much two men in a cage beating each other, that way of battling.
Mm.
So for me, though, it's that idea of having athletes for a long enough time. So you push them in a smart way that they're not getting, obviously they're going to take damage no matter what. It's impossible not to. But the idea is creating in the safer, smarter spaces, and things like that. So a lot of my courses, my designs, our gameplays all go to the idea of execution is worth just as much as difficulty or flow or versatility. It's just, if you can, I almost want to make like one of those rules. Like if you end up going to the hospital, you automatically kind of like lose. And the reason I mean that is like, I would like our speed comps. Here's where I think I'm going with that is another way. We added penalties to it.
Mm.
So for our speed comps, current gameplays is you start in one spot, you end in another spot. It's very clear. And within that spot, there's a path. If you weave out of the path or go out of bounds, you get penalties, as well as here's like the preferred way. If you use this to get to that, to get to that, to get to that without touching these things, which we make them red. If you touch the red things, you get a penalty by the finish line. So the person who wins our speed comps is fewest penalties, fastest time.
Mm-hmm.
So automatically, if you get through it faster but have a penalty, you automatically lose to anybody who has zero penalties. And what we've seen by that, number one, is people have kind of gotten rid of that run 100% as fast as I can and just fail forward through the course. Just keep, like what is it, like a bowling ball, like down the stairs, like that kind of technique is. We've seen far less of that, which we like. Instead of what it used to be was, if you touch that, we just add 5 seconds. If you touch that, we add 10 seconds. But then we have people just run through the course and make all these mistakes, and still sometimes we're podium. We're like, and then obviously we want to go to the next level, like you're talking about. Like one day we want to be all like on roofs, because I want to take the best people from all these pretty safe, controlled environments and go to these, not so controlled environments. The real, like there is some real risk here and stuff like that. So if you can't show in these regional / national competitions that you can't do these courses without penalties, that means you wouldn't be able to go do this on rooftops. You wouldn't be able to do this there,
I
where
see.
those are the real penalties.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen there's very different things over the years I've seen with how to navigate that space and like create interesting, compelling courses, but also not have it be, you know, spectator friendly or whatever. There's a lot that goes into those competitions.
Oh,
So, I
yeah.
mean, it's
The
crazy.
toughest
So,
is spectators, making that friendly. Yeah, like when we were
yeah.
on the mosque, in Turkey, and they kept saying, "I want the crowd to be here," and I'm like, "Okay, like why do?" Or you could move the crowd somewhere else, and we could do way cooler stuff because this is where the cool stuff is.
Such a
Um,
beast.
there's always that like give and take of the viewer, the athlete, and right now where we're at financially, you want as many people to, we're in this like pay to play, which is, where I don't think a lot of people fully grasp. They have their ideas on where we should be compared to like where uh, where I feel, and we're in this pay to play. And what I mean by that is like we have like 6 qualifiers in the next 6 weeks or something. Those qualifiers uh, wins get to come to the national. The national is also going to have an on-site qualifier. And some people, you're kind of mad about that. They're like, well, if I win, why would I go win this qualifier? It's like, well, if you win the qualifier, you automatically get to go to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you get a discount to get there, like a really good discount. And because we give you that discount, we need like 10 people to show up and at least try on the on-site to pay to offset that,
Mm-hmm.
as well as we want them to have a good time, and we're trying to find this way to push the best, and I wouldn't say the worst. I would just say like the less skilled, the more hobby driven, not motivated at the same time in the same space.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only way profitability wise right now too, it also works, that we could pay for it to then also pay to do another one in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of variables when you're designing these competitions as well as these courses. But for me, always the number one thing is safety, because if people break a bone, they're probably not coming back. They also could potentially sue. Also, it takes up the whole competition stops because somebody's injured on the course. Also, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
Sponsorships also look at it. Like look at
I've
the
been at a
airway.
competition once or twice where the injury just kind of like kills the vibe real hard.
As it absolutely should.
That's it should
100%.
obviously, yeah. I mean, but like, yeah, it's just like, oof, yeah, that's
Yeah,
no
yeah,
fun.
100%. And that's what's funny is that's why the sport was so. Whenever growing up, and I tell people I do parkour, they're like, oh, "Do you want to die?" And I'm like, "No, like
Mm-hmm.
no, not." That's a weird question. And they're like, "Well, then why do you do that?" I'm like, "Because I'm drawn to doing it. I like doing it. I'm good at it." And they'd just be like, "Well, I just think you should just take care of yourself." And I'm like, "I do." And there would always be this thing, just make sure you know what you're doing. I do. And then eventually came to a certain point where I'm like, I've never broke a bone. I've made a living off it. I'm still passionate about it. I've helped thousands upon thousands of people be able to do it and not get hurt. Like it comes to a certain point, to where you just kind of look back and you think about it, and it's that's the constant battle too. Is like I love Store, I love Joe Scandrett, I love Dom Tomaso a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
respect everything they're doing, and obviously it's true because those are the main videos I normally have parents show me, and they're like, "You're asking kids to do this?" I'm like, "No, no, I'm not asking any kid to do that." Like those, that's the cream of the crop. That's the top. That's where it should be. Where they should be. Your kid shouldn't be there yet. Maybe one day, I don't know. But we're gonna start here. I'm gonna show you things, and they got to choose that one day. And
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you rather they had some kind of education in it first? Like when I did it, uh, yeah, I saw Jackie Chan jump a roof as a kid in Rumble in the Bronx. I remember watching that trailer on cable,
Oh yeah.
and I'm just sitting there as a kid, and I remember my uncle at the time looked over to my stepdad at the time and just goes, "That guy just flew." And I was
Yeah.
like, and I remember that moment, how much that impacted me. Just like, whoa. And then I remember like watching the movie on VHS many years later. And I'm like, I want to do that. And
Hmm.
I sure enough did. And nobody, yeah, I didn't get, any of the training. There was no talking about that I was aware of or anything. So wouldn't you at least let your kid be trained first and like stuck, and then obviously as a coach, it's your responsibility to not say, you guys have to go jump a roof someday or something or whatever. But, you know, that's like the kind of the outlook I've always had on it with competition as well. Is same with UFC. If their fighter gets KO'd, that's probably, 4 fights less that they're ever going to be able to perform. So you
Yep.
want to help them grow and push them, but you obviously don't want to break them. And that's how I think about the same with, I think about it like with pro wrestling, like we talked about, where Vince McMahon has to have them on the road 52 weeks a year. So it's how do we push it? How do we entertain the audience? How do you get what you want as a performer? But keep in mind, like, we're professionals. This is a career. This is like, you know, we can't have you break yourself. So our game plays and criterias take safety into account also, where I know some people, not, discredit whatever,
Mm.
like to push other ways, which you have to, right? There's got to be that extreme. We do this because the most entertaining things happen. Okay. Um, do that. If we do this because there's the most injuries, then in my opinion, as a federation or competition director, if there's injuries happening, you should be changing the criteria. That's your job,
Mm.
is creating the safest environment for the sport to grow.
Nice. Well, I mean, just great stuff, man. I think that like, there's very little else that I have to ask you about. Is there anything that you want to, just talk about that we hadn't gotten to yet today? I know you're doing a lot with the World Cup championships coming up still. We kind of touched on it, but is there, and then we touched on the Perth park that you just found out was alive and well and being in used. Is there anything else like you want to discuss today?
Um, no, I don't know. No, I think it's good. I mean, yeah, the stuff's all happening at what USA Parkour underscore officials, like the Instagram where all the stuff kind of is showing the qualifiers and where that's all happening and kind of laid out. USA Parkour Cup is the details for the finals. We split it this year. We were doing it for the athletes too. This is something else, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
We used to do one event every year for it. And it would be in Tampa, Florida for the last 3 years or 4 years. And we would do speed and freestyle all together, youth to adults. And it was a lot, changing around the courses, talking to, the parents, talking to the athletes, the judges. It was exhausting and a big thing. And we were in a pretty good size arena. We decided to take it back a notch, and we're going to go to Austin, Texas. We're going to be in Intrepid Parkour, which is a gym I designed probably 6 years ago. It's an amazing facility. I don't know if you've ever been out to it or know of it, but I highly recommend it.
Unfortunately, not yet, but one day.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a very cool facility. It's produced people like Jared Ludy. I always forget his real name, but Twitch is what I know him as. Helped produce him. Um, Parker Taylor. Just a lot of good athletes come out of there. Steezy Steve. But then we're gonna do. Right now, we're doing our qualifier season just for speed. So the gyms, some are doing speed and freestyle as kind of one event for the qualifier, but we're gonna do speed. We're gonna do a freestyle finals we're gonna do just the speed finals in February, and then the freestyle season starts from March to May, and we're gonna do the freestyle finals in June. So the idea is like where we used to, number one, it's to help the sport have a little more focus, as well as the businesses have hopefully a little bit more focus and things to keep their students motivated and growth. Two is the athletes themselves. We'd have a lot of athletes that would go to the qualifier and compete at both, but if they like whichever one they podiumed higher in would be the only one that they would then come do in Tampa because they didn't want to like risk getting tired or injured for the other one. So we were able to kind of try this new structure because once again every year we try to do something new. So this is like the idea with this is like speed, focus on it, hone it in, hopefully athletes that normally maybe wouldn't have done speed now do it too. And then we flow right into the freestyle kind of season next after that. Obviously, I think in the freestyle one, we'll probably add something like we do skill type things, or we do best tricks, which is like one trick at 4 events, and it's like a cumulative score instead of just one thing, one place. So we're going to add some different kind of things to freestyle, and try to make it like an event, in a season of training with like these focuses. So hopefully people kind of work in and out. Because I know for me growing up, I trained with wrestling, and then when the wrestling season ended, I would go I did swimming 1 year to cross train. I did track and field 1 year to cross train. I did lacrosse 1 year to cross train, just to stay in shape, kind of around. So I think what we're trying to maybe look at and do is something like that, of like giving each discipline a little bit more breathing space, giving it its own kind of time for people to kind of dabble in it, learn from it, grow with it, and stuff like that. So that's what we're doing with this one. And all that's at usaparkourcup.com or the USA Parkour _official Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll make sure I put all that in the description, and anyone can just jump right in there.
Sorry, man. Yeah, the description's going to be... Yeah,
it's going to be hefty one this time around.
Yeah. Sorry, man. Sorry.
You're good.
But yeah, no, dude, I appreciate you doing this and taking the time, and I know it wasn't easy. Yeah. And
my pleasure, man. My pleasure and honor to have you on. And one last question. This is, I don't know if I'm just like not in touch enough to know where this is at, but the George McGowan documentary, any update on when that is coming out, or did it already release and I just missed it?
It did. Yeah, so that's another funny thing. So the guy, Max, what's Max's last name? I don't know if I know Max's last name. I'll have to get it to you. Damn it. I got a computer. Genius. So that was a funny one. Jimmy the Giant was potentially going to come out and do that documentary. We were doing the first certification in the Philippines with the Philippines Sports Obstacle Federation. And Jimmy last minute was like, you know what? I don't think this is for me. I don't know, how I'm feeling this. I'm like, okay, no worries. And George had this dude, Max Ward, come out last minute. Like, what a G. Like, literally never met me. Just took a call like we're doing. I go, yo, do you want to come with me to the Philippines for 10 days? And he's like, yo, let's do it. This was like, they just were getting destroyed with COVID, and we are going right into it. So he ended up dropping it on his channel because that was part of the deal. We'll fly you out. We'll let you do it. It doesn't pay that great, but you get it for your channel and your views, and we'll promote your channel and your views. So we did it like that. And it was also pretty loose because we were trying to find the story. The idea obviously was George came out and did the USA Parkour Cup with me, and I just vibed with him so much that I go, I think I could hang out with you for 14 days in the Philippines if you are down to help me teach these people, because, I think you're the best athlete. In my opinion right now, I think he's the best. If I could be any athlete, I'd like to do what he can do. So I'll put it that way. So it's very, personable. I go, and you seem to know how to teach very well, and you're very professional. Like, when we were at the cup, he was showing up on time. He's asking, what do I need to do? He was just like above and beyond, like a professional, not just like a celebrity guest, which neither are wrong. But I was like, okay, that's cool. And so the goal was he's going to come out, assist in the certification. If he likes it, he could be our master trainer of the UK, and he could, run the certification. So there's no real pressure. So it was a feel through process because he had never taken the certification. And by the end, we just had such a great time. And funny enough, when we showed up, he was going through a knee injury that he didn't want to tell me about because he was afraid he wasn't going to like get the job maybe or something. And I'm very much like not that kind of person. I said, just don't I can do all the moves. You just be George. You're cool enough. And just teach. Just give him your wisdom. And Max captured it really well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Really well, that whole experience.
Well, shout out Maximus Ward. We'll give him a plug in the description as well. And
have you ever had him on?
Check that out. No, I have not. I've not had the pleasure of meeting him, but I have followed some of his work before, and so I'm surprised actually I missed that.
I
But
highly recommend, yeah,
I'll
getting him
definitely
on. You
check it
guys
out.
would vibe. Yeah, yeah, he's a unique snowflake in this parkour community in my mind of just super positivity, super help you find what you want to do. Not just you just come to him, you're just like, I'm thinking of doing this, and he's just like, okay, how can we do it? Very much like every single day we were trying to find the story with George or what we were doing. Every single day there was an obstacle. Every single day it was like,
Mm.
try to find something, Max. I don't know. I wasn't able to direct him very well because it was like we were just, in the deep end with it all. So
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate your time again very much. Everything is in the description. You guys are putting on some amazing events. I'm sure I'll have the pleasure of attending them one of these days. And yeah, thank you again for just sharing everything, helping address any of the questions that I had in my head, and then also just sharing some of that fun UFC, skateboarding, etc.
yeah, man.
passion. So
Yeah, dude, thank you for having me. Anytime, honestly. Yeah, open to it. Yeah, love it.
all right,
Awesome.
cheers.
Thank you, Brandon. Have a good one.
All right, you too, brother. Take care.
Adios.
Woo! That's right. Let's go. All right. Thank you guys for listening. You know the drill. Appreciate you. If you need to get into that description, which many of you probably should, there's a lot that we covered. Go ahead and look and click on the links. There's all of it there. Anything we mentioned. And yeah, as always, just a big thanks again to the guest, Robbie, and to you guys for listening. Catch you on that next episode. Take care.